The Dawnshore Greenway, a novel by Willow Jules. Chapter 1. Marin Ellis had always been good at holding her breath. Not literally, she could barely last 8 seconds underwater, but in the quiet, suffocating ways that mattered. She held her breath when her boss piled extra work on her desk. She held it when her coworkers cut in front of her in meetings. She held it every time someone said, "You're such a lifesaver, Marin. Can you stay a little later?" She held it so often she'd forgotten what a full breath felt like. The morning it happened began like all the others. The flicker of fluorescent lights, the steady hum of computers, the familiar ache blooming between her shoulder blades. Marin sat in her gray-walled cubicle. 7 years of her life pressed into four carpeted corners, clicking through emails no one read unless she sent them. "Morning, Marin," someone called as they walked by. They didn't wait for her response. By 10 a.m., she had already fixed 2 client errors, answered 14 emails, and taken on an extra task because her coworker just wasn't feeling it today. Her heartbeat thudded a little too loud in her ears, but that wasn't new. Stress had become a roommate she never invited but couldn't seem to evict. At 10:17, her vision blurred. At first, she blinked it away. Maybe she needed water. Maybe her contact lenses were dry. But then the tightness came, a sharp, squeezing pressure just beneath her collarbone, spreading outward like a fist closing around her lungs. She inhaled. Nothing moved. Her breath caught halfway. Her hands trembled. The cursor on her monitor split into two. The office buzzed around her, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, but everything felt oddly distant, like she was underwater listening to life above the surface. Not again. Not today. Please, not today. Marin pushed herself to her feet, clutching the edge of her cubicle as a wave of dizziness rolled through her. She forced herself to walk the 10 steps to her boss's office. Every step felt like she was moving through syrup. Damon didn't look up when she reached the doorway. "Damon," she whispered, her voice barely there. I can't breathe right. Something's wrong." He sighed, loudly, dramatically, as if she had interrupted something important. "You look fine. Did you take your break this morning? I think I need to go to urgent care. Now." He finally glanced at her, annoyance tightening his expression. "Marin, you know we're short-staffed. If you leave, who's going to finish the client reports?" She braced a hand on the doorframe, trying once more to inhale. Her lungs refused. "I'm scared," she admitted, surprising herself. "My chest." "Clock out," he cut in, waving a dismissive hand. "But you need to come back as soon as you're done. We have deadlines. You disappearing for half the day hurts the team." "Hurts the team." He said it like she wasn't the one hurting. Marin nodded because she didn't know what else to do. She turned away, pulse thundering, breath shallow. She made it to the elevator before the tears began. Urgent care smelled like antiseptic and overheated plastic chairs. The nurse took one look at Marin's trembling hands and rushed her to the back. After 3 vials of blood, an EKG, and a series of careful questions, the doctor finally sat across from her. "Marin," the doctor said gently, "your iron levels have dropped sharply, and your mild heart valve regurgitation is being aggravated by severe stress. Your body is showing signs of burnout collapse." Marin stared at her. "Burnout? Your heart is working harder than it should. You need rest, at least a week. Absolutely no high-stress environments." She laughed before she could stop herself, a broken, disbelieving sound. "My job doesn't really allow for rest." The doctor tilted her head. "Then your job is endangering your health." The words felt like a spotlight shining on a truth Marin had been avoiding for years. She sat in her car afterward, the doctor's note shaking in her hands. Her phone buzzed. "Damon." She answered with a whisper. "Hello." "So," Damon said. "What did they say? You coming back?" The doctor said I need to rest. For a week." A long pause. Then, "Marin, we can't afford that. If you don't show up tomorrow, you're leaving the team hanging. You understand that, right?" Tears blurred her vision. "Yes," she said softly, but not for the reasons he thought. She did understand. She understood perfectly. She was dying inside this job and no one cared. Not once in 7 years had anyone asked if she was okay. She had been disappearing piece by piece, and today she'd finally felt it physically. Something inside her cracked open, not in pain but in awakening. Damon, she said quietly. Yes, I won't be coming back. Marin. She ended the call. The silence afterward felt like her first full breath in years. She pressed her forehead to the steering wheel as tears streamed down her face. Not just sadness, relief, a strange, trembly kind of hope. She didn't know what she was going to do next. She didn't know how she would pay bills long term. She didn't know who she was without this job. But she knew one thing. She couldn't go back. Not when her body and spirit had begged her to leave long before her voice ever dared to. Today she listened. For the first time, she chose herself. Chapter 2. Marin didn't sleep that night. Not really. She drifted in and out of shallow dreams, each one tangled with images of her cubicle, Damon's dismissive glare, and the cold beep of the heart monitor in urgent care. When she finally sat up in bed, the room still felt heavy with the weight of yesterday, but something inside her felt different. The silence wasn't suffocating. It was spacious. Her phone buzzed with notifications she refused to check. Instead, she wrapped herself in a blanket and sat by the window. Dawn was just beginning, soft shades of peach stretching across the sky. She inhaled slowly. Her breath came easier today. A soft ache lingered beneath her ribs, a reminder of how close she had come to collapsing completely. She whispered into the quiet, I can't go back. Not to the job. Not to the version of herself who stayed small so others could stay comfortable. She couldn't explain it, but the thought of returning made her chest tighten all over again. She needed air. Real air. Not recycled office ventilation and fluorescent hums. Something clean. Something living. Something that didn't punish her for simply existing. She grabbed her keys and left the apartment, letting her feet decide where to go. They led her to a small secondhand bookstore tucked beside a juice shop, a place she rarely visited, except when she needed something she couldn't name. The door chimed softly as she entered. It smelled like old paper and sea salt. Someone must have left the back window cracked. Marin wandered without purpose, touching spines lightly with her fingertips. She had come here the same way people walk into churches, not looking for answers, but hoping something sacred might look back. A section labeled Travel and Journeys caught her eye. She paused. A thin, ocean blue book was sticking out farther than the rest. The Dawnshore Greenway, a traveler's guide. She frowned. She had heard vaguely about a long route up the East Coast, but she'd never looked into it. She slid the book from the shelf. A smooth pebble fell from between its pages and landed near her shoe. She blinked. A stone? Inside a book? She picked it up, a small, rounded piece of gray-white quartz, polished from years of water. Attached to it with twine was a tiny handwritten tag. Dawn token, may your journey change you. Her breath caught. Something about it felt intentional, like the universe had dropped a breadcrumb at her feet. She flipped open the book. Inside was a photo of several travelers standing beside a rocky coastline in Maine, each holding a small stone up to the sunrise. The caption read, Every Dawnshore journey begins with a stone from the shores of Florida and ends with a release at the edge of Maine. She read on. The first stone represents the weight you carry. Each stone collected along the trail marks a moment of growth. At the northern terminus, travelers cast their first stone into the sea or add it to the trail's communal cairn, leaving behind the person they once were. A shiver went through her. Not fear. Something else. Recognition. A tradition built entirely around letting go. Breathing again. Becoming new. There was a pull in her chest. Gentle, but unmistakable. She whispered the words aloud. Dawnshore Greenway. The bookstore owner, an elderly woman with silver braids, approached. That's a good one, she said, smiling softly. A lot of folks take that trail when they're looking for themselves, or trying to leave something behind. Marin's throat tightened. I didn't know people still did things like this. Oh, honey, the woman said, touching her arm warmly. People have always gone searching. Some just use roads that haven't been paved yet. Marin looked down at the stone in her hand. Its cool weight grounded her in a way she didn't expect. Is this yours? She asked. The woman shook her head. No, travelers leave them sometimes. You're free to keep it. Maybe it's meant for you. Meant for her. The idea made tears prickle behind her eyes. She tucked the book under her arm and held the stone against her palm. And for the first time in years, she felt the faint spark of something she hadn't felt since childhood. Possibility. Back home, she sat on the edge of her bed with the book open across her lap. She traced a finger over the map, a thin green line starting at the bottom of Florida and stretching all the way to Maine. 3,000 miles. She should have felt intimidated, overwhelmed, unqualified, but instead, she felt something else entirely. Hope. Maybe the Dawnshore Greenway wasn't just a trail. Maybe it was an invitation. Her phone buzzed again. Another email she refused to open. Her chest tightened, not from fear this time, but from certainty. She whispered into her quiet apartment. I'm going. The words felt terrifying and freeing and absolutely right. Maren Ellis didn't know how to bike long distances. She didn't know how to camp. She didn't know how she would survive 3,000 miles. But she knew she couldn't survive one more year of living half asleep. She looked at the dawn token in her hand, and she made the bravest decision of her life. She would start over 1 mile at dawn. Chapter 3. For the first time in 7 years, Maren woke up without an alarm. No emails, no deadlines, no Damon, just quiet. It startled her. She sat up slowly, expecting the old panic to flood her chest, the familiar sense of being behind, of not doing enough. Instead, there was only an unfamiliar stillness, like the pause between waves. Her apartment felt different too, as if something had been lifted, leaving behind a strange emptiness where her old life used to stand. She wasn't sure yet if the emptiness felt terrifying or sacred. Maren made a cup of tea and sat cross-legged on the living room floor with the Dawnshore Greenway guidebook open in front of her. The small stone, the dawn token she had found tucked inside, rested in her palm, cool and grounding. The book's pages were worn, highlighted, dog-eared in places by travelers who came before her. Some notes had been scribbled in the margins. Long the stretch between water stops. Bring extra. Cried on this bridge. Worth it. Saw dolphins here. Met my best friend on this day. Her throat tightened. She turned to the first full-page map, Florida to Maine. 3,000 miles of coastline. A green line winding through states she hadn't visited since she was a child. She whispered, Am I really doing this? The stone warmed slightly in her hand, or maybe that was just her imagination. Her computer sat closed on her desk across the room. Like a relic of a past she wasn't ready to look at yet. But her phone buzzed with messages. Naomi, sister, you okay? Call me. Coworker Jen, I heard you left. OMG, are you serious? Damon, return your ID badge to HR. She set the phone face down on the couch. Not today. Her heart wasn't ready. Instead, she opened her laptop, not for work, but for research. How to bike long distances for beginners. How to choose a touring bike. Can a beginner cycle 3,000 miles? She half expected Google to scream an O at her, but instead she found article after article full of encouragement and stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. A woman in her 20s who biked across the U.S. after a bad breakup. A retired couple in their 70s who rode the Dawnshore section by section. A man who carried a small rock from his childhood home to the end of the trail. Everyone had a reason to start. Everyone had something to release. Maren placed her hand on her chest, on the place that still fluttered with lingering ache. So do I, she whispered. By noon, she found herself walking into Harbor Wheel and Repair, a tiny bike shop squeezed between a surf store and a taco stand. The smell of rubber tires and chain oil hit her immediately, oddly comforting. A man with a bushy beard and friendly smile popped up behind the counter. First bike? He asked, as if he could read the anxious energy radiating off her. Maren nodded. First. Everything, she admitted. I'm thinking about doing the Dawnshore Greenway. The man's eyebrows lifted, impressed but not doubtful. Well, that's a big dream, he said warmly. But big dreams need good equipment. What's your budget? She swallowed. Enough, she said. Enough for something that won't fall apart on me. He grinned. I like your spirit. Come on. I'll show you the touring models. He fitted her for a bike, adjusting seat height, explaining gears, letting her test ride the different frames in the parking lot. She wobbled badly the first time, almost tipping over, but the breeze in her hair made something bright bloom in her chest. She hadn't felt that since childhood. Freedom. After an hour, she found it, the bike. Midnight blue. Smooth ride. Strong frame. A machine built for miles and miles. She ran her hand along the handlebars. Feels like it's yours already. Huh? The shop owner said. She nodded, and for the first time in days, she smiled. Back home, Marin placed the new bike by her door and sat on the floor again with the guidebook. She opened her palms and looked at the Dawn token. She realized something. The token she'd found wasn't her burdened stone, not her true beginning. If she was going to start the Dawnshore Greenway, she needed to choose her own. So she took a short drive to the nearest beach. The ocean breeze wrapped around her, warm and humid. Children played, waves crashed, and the tide lapped at her ankles as she stepped closer to the shore. She crouched down, running her fingers through the pebbles scattered along the sand. She searched slowly, patiently. Then she found it, a small, oval stone with a faint golden shimmer in the sunlight. Smooth, like it had been shaped by years of surrendering to the sea. She held it up. This is who I've been carrying, she whispered. This is what I'm ready to let go. Her first real Dawn token. Her burdened stone. She closed her fist around it and breathed deeply. And for a moment, her chest didn't hurt. Not even a little. That evening she made a list. Buy Panniers Pack minimal clothing, sunscreen, basic first aid trail, snacks, Dawn token pouch, write resignation letter. Official. Choose starting point in Florida, tell Naomi. Eventually. The last item made her wince. Naomi loved her, but worry was Naomi's love language. Still, this wasn't about worry. This was about living. As the sun set outside her window, Marin lay in bed with the guidebook beside her and the burdened stone resting on her nightstand. She wasn't fearless. She wasn't ready. But she wasn't the same woman who'd stood in Damon's doorway, begging for a breath. And tomorrow she would take her first step toward Dawnshore. Or rather, her first mile. Chapter 4. The morning Marin decided to leave for Florida, the world felt strangely quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet she'd felt after quitting. This was different. This was the hush of standing on the edge of something enormous. Her pack bag sat by the door, neatly lined up like obedient soldiers. Panniers filled with clothes, tools, first aid supplies, snacks. A small canvas pouch with her Dawn tokens. A fresh leather journal she'd bought last night, the first journal she'd owned since high school. And her new bike leaned against the wall, gleaming softly in the golden morning light. She took a slow, shaky breath. This is real. I'm really doing this. It still didn't feel like her life. It felt like the kind of thing braver people did. People with money, with experience, with boldness in their blood. People who weren't afraid of making mistakes. But then she remembered standing in Damon's office, unable to breathe, dismissed like she didn't matter. And she remembered sitting at the shore, holding her burdened stone and feeling her chest loosen for the first time in years. She mattered, even if she was the only one who believed it right now. Her phone rang for the third time that morning. Naomi. Marin closed her eyes, letting the guilt flutter in her chest. She answered anyway. Hey, Marin, where have you been? Naomi's voice was a mixture of worry and relief. Jen told me you left your job. Is that true? Why didn't you tell me? Marin swallowed. I had a medical scare. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. What? Why didn't you call me right away? Because I didn't want you to worry. Marin, worrying is literally what I do. Naomi paused. What happened? The memory flashed like a bruise, the blurry vision, the pressure in her chest, Damon's cold voice. I couldn't breathe, she whispered. The doctor said stress was worsening my heart valve issue. She told me I needed to rest. Damon told me to come back anyway. Silence. A deep, disbelieving silence. Marin. He did what? I know. That's unacceptable. You should sue. You should. I'm not going back, Marin said gently. I quit. Naomi exhaled, shaky. Okay, okay. I'm glad you're safe. But what are you going to do now? Marin's hand drifted to the Dawn token pouch. She hesitated, not because she was unsure, but because she was afraid of sounding ridiculous. I'm going to Florida, she said softly. To start over? To bike, Marin corrected. To bike the Dawnshore Greenway. There was a long pause. Marin, that trail is 3,000 miles. Have you ever biked more than 6? No. Do you even know how to camp? No. Marin, I know, she whispered. I know, Naomi. But I have to do this. Why? Because I don't want to die in a cubicle. Because I've never chosen myself. Because I want to breathe again. She said none of those things. Instead, because something needs to change. And this feels like the right change. Naomi's voice softened. I just don't want you to get hurt. I've been hurt for years, Marin whispered. This is the first thing that feels like healing. A sigh. A surrender. Promise me you'll call when you reach Florida. I promise. I love you. I love you too. When the call ended, Marin wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. It hurt to leave. It would hurt worse to stay. By afternoon, she stood outside her apartment building, loading the last bag onto her bike rack. The sky was a hazy blue, warm with early summer. People walked by on the sidewalk, strangers who had no idea that she was leaving her old life behind. She looked up at her window, the place where she had spent years crying quietly, working late hours, numbing herself with exhaustion. It had held her, but it had also caged her. Thank you, she whispered to the empty window. But it's time. She swung a leg over her bike and pushed off carefully, wobbling slightly at first. The breeze brushed her cheeks, lifting strands of her hair. Her heart pounded against her ribs, not from fear, not entirely, but from the strange electricity of freedom. With every turn of the pedals, she felt herself loosen. Block by block, her old life fell away behind her. By the time she reached the bus station, where she'd ride down to Florida's starting point, she felt lighter, clearer, almost reborn. Inside the station, she bought a ticket, wheeled her bike to the loading area, and waited. The terminal smelled faintly of coffee and diesel fuel, but there was a hopeful hum in the air. That feeling of people going places, even if no one knew where they'd end up. Across from her sat a woman with a backpack decked in embroidered patches. She noticed Marin's bike and smiled warmly. Heading on a trip? The woman asked. Marin nodded. To the Dawnshore Greenway. The woman's eyes lit up. Oh, I did that 5 years ago. It changed my life. A flutter in Marin's chest. Really? How? I stopped being afraid, the woman said simply. That trail taught me I could endure things I never thought I could. I still carry my Dawn tokens in my glove compartment. Marin blinked. You did the stone tradition? Of course, the woman laughed. Everyone does. It keeps you grounded. Keeps you honest with yourself. Marin touched her pouch unconsciously. The stranger noticed. You'll do fine, she said gently. The trail knows what you need. The trail knows. The woman nodded. It has a way of putting the right things in your path at the right time. Marin felt a warmth spread through her chest. Maybe it was silly. Maybe it was destiny. Maybe it was both. The bus pulled up with a hiss of brakes. The woman stood first. Good luck, sweetheart. Thank you, Marin whispered. And then, with shaking hands and a fluttering heart, Marin lifted her bike onto the rack, stepped onto the bus, and took her seat by the window. She pressed her forehead gently to the glass as the engine rumbled to life. She wasn't running away. She was running toward something she didn't have a name for yet. But she would. Somewhere between Florida and Maine, she would. As the bus pulled away, the world outside began to blur into motion. Marin reached into her pocket, closed her fist around the burdened stone, and felt, for the first time, the quiet thrill of becoming someone new. Chapter 5. Florida greeted Marin with warm air that smelled faintly of citrus and ocean salt. When she stepped off the bus, her hair frizzed instantly in the humidity. She laughed despite herself, a breathy, shaky sound that felt like the release of something she'd been holding too long. The bus station was small and sun-faded. Palms swayed overhead, their fronds whispering in the morning breeze. She unhooked her midnight blue bike from the rack and stood there for a moment just holding it, feeling the weight of this decision settle into her bones. Her phone buzzed. Naomi, just checking in. Text me when you're safe. Love you. Marin typed back, made it. I'm okay. We'll call later. Promise. Her stomach fluttered. She had made it. She was actually here. The beginning of the Dawnshore Greenway was less than a mile from the station. She pushed her bike along the palm-lined sidewalk, passing pastel buildings with chipped paint and closed beach shops waiting for the day to start. A few joggers passed her, their shoes slapping softly against the pavement. She wondered what they saw when they looked at her, a woman alone with too much gear, too much fear, and a trail stretching longer than her entire sense of confidence. But she kept walking. The Greenway Southern Gateway appeared gradually, a wooden archway adorned with seashells, driftwood, and a metal plaque reading, Dawnshore Greenway, where every step north is a step toward yourself. Her breath caught. There were already a few travelers gathered beneath the arch, two older men tightening their packs, a teenage girl posing for a photo, a mother helping her young son adjust his helmet, and someone else too. A woman with silver streak curls tied in a colorful scarf, Lila Brookshire, laughing warmly as she helped another traveler navigate their gear. She wore earth-toned clothing, a jangling bracelet of copper charms, and a gentle confidence that radiated like sunlight. Beside Lila stood a bearded man in a bike shop apron, handing out free tire patches and offering tips. His shirt said Cruz Cycle Company across the chest. Mateo Cruz. When he spotted Marin's hesitation, he waved her over. First timer. He guessed, grinning. How? How can you tell? She asked. Because you're standing like the trail is a lion that might lunge at you at any second. She laughed nervously. It sort of feels that way. That's normal, Lila chimed in sweetly. She stepped closer, her eyes warm and knowing. First mile's always the hardest. After that, your heart will do the leading. Marin blinked. Something about the woman felt familiar, comforting, like meeting someone who'd been part of your story long before you knew their name. Lila's smile deepened. I'm Lila, passing through on my second time doing Dawnshore. Second. Marin's eyes widened. You completed the whole thing. Every mile, sugar. She winked. You will too. Mateo pointed to Marin's bike. You look ready. New ride. Brand new, she admitted. Perfect, he said. Every good journey starts with something untested. Unspoken words hummed under that, just like you. Before she could respond, a small ceremony began near the water's edge, a loose gathering of new travelers forming a crescent along the shoreline. A ranger in a navy green shirt stepped forward. Welcome to the Dawnshore Greenway, the ranger announced gently. Our tradition asks that each of you choose your first dawn token during sunrise. Your burden stone. Your beginning. Marin swallowed, her heart lurching. This was real now. The ocean shimmered under the early light, small waves catching gold as the sun crept toward the horizon. Travelers walked forward slowly, reverently, descending onto the sand to collect their stones. Marin followed, barefoot, feeling the cool grain slide between her toes. She knelt near the shoreline and sifted through the small, water-worn pebbles. Some were gray and smooth, others flecked with pink or amber. She kept searching, letting her fingers glide over the stones until one seemed to almost hum beneath her touch. A soft gray stone with a pale vein running through it, like a single line of light cutting through darkness. She knew this was the one. She closed her eyes and whispered, "This is the weight I'm letting go." When she opened her eyes, the sun split across the horizon in a blaze of peach and gold, the first dawn of her new life. As the travelers returned from the shore, Marin noticed a man standing a little apart from the group, leaning on his bike. Tall, broad-shouldered, sun-browned skin, strong arms marked with faded scars. His dark hair was wind-ruffled, and he watched the sunrise with the stillness of someone who had known loss and learned not to run from it. This was Elias Hart. Though she didn't know his name yet, something about him struck her deeply. Not attraction, not yet. More like recognition. As if the trail had placed him there intentionally, just as the woman at the bus station had said. Elias glanced toward her. Their eyes met briefly. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. But he held her gaze for one long, grounding moment, not judging, not curious, simply seeing her, before looking back at the ocean. Marin's breath hitched. Strange, she thought. I feel like he already knows something about me. She shook the feeling off and returned to Lila and Mateo as the group began fastening packs and adjusting helmets. Mateo elbowed her lightly. Ready? No, she admitted honestly. But I'm going anyway. That, Lila said softly, is exactly what makes you ready. When the first official mile marker came into view, a wooden post carved with a number 1 and adorned with dozens of painted Dawn tokens, Marin felt her chest swell. She touched her burdened stone in her pocket. 1 mile. Just one. But it was the first mile she'd chosen not for someone else, but for herself. She looked north, toward a coastline she'd never traveled, toward uncertainty, toward healing, toward whoever she was becoming. She gripped her handlebars, and with trembling breath and steady heart, Marin Ellis began her journey up the Dawnshore Greenway. Chapter 6. The first thing Marin discovered about the Dawnshore Greenway was that it was beautiful. The second thing she discovered was that it was harder than it looked. Within the first hour, sweat was trickling down her back, her calves were on fire, and she had already questioned her life choices at least 11 times. The Florida humidity wrapped around her like a damp blanket, and her helmet felt 2 sizes too small. She tried to maintain a steady rhythm. Push, breathe. Push, breathe. But the trail dipped slightly uphill, and her legs were still soft with years of desk work. Behind her, a cyclist rang their bell as they passed. You've got this, the woman called with a cheerful wave. Marin managed a breathless smile in return. If she had enough air, she would have thanked her. She glanced at her handlebar mileage counter. 3.7 miles. Only 2,996.3 to go. Oh, Lord, she whispered, laughing despite herself. But with each turn of the pedals, she felt something loosening inside her. Fear didn't vanish, but it shifted, making space for something new. Determination, curiosity, a quiet budding strength. By late morning, she reached a shady stretch lined with mangroves. The canopy above her filtered sunlight into soft green patterns across the path. She pulled over near a wooden bench overlooking the water and took a long drink from her water bottle. Her heart was still beating fast, partly from exertion, partly from disbelief. I'm really here. I'm really doing this. She opened her Dawn token pouch. Her burdened stone felt heavier today, as if reminding her why she started. I won't quit, she told it softly. Before she closed the pouch, she noticed a small, smooth pebble resting near her foot. Round, sandy orange, warm from the sun. It seemed to glow faintly. She picked it up and held it in her hand. Her second Dawn token, the token of beginning. She knew without question that this one symbolized her first victory. She didn't turn back. She placed the new stone gently in her pouch. Just as she tightened the straps on her bag, she heard the faint crunch of gravel behind her. She turned and saw Elias Hart approaching on his bike. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't struggling. He simply moved with the steady, quiet rhythm of someone who'd done this before. When he reached her resting spot, he slowed. Not stopped, just slowed, as though checking without appearing to check. You doing all right? He asked, voice low. Marin straightened, flustered by how calm and grounded he looked. Yes, she said quickly, too quickly. I'm trying. His eyes softened, the faintest warmth flickering in them. You're doing fine. First day's always the roughest. She exhaled a shaky laugh. Is it really? It is for most people, he said. Took me a week before I stopped cursing the humidity. His comment loosened something inside her. He wasn't judging her. He wasn't pitying her. He was normalizing her struggle. That small kindness rooted itself somewhere deep. He pointed to her bike. Your left brake's rubbing a little. Marin blinked. It is. Elias nodded. Mind if I? She stepped aside. He knelt, turning the wheel, tightening a bolt with a compact multi-tool he kept in his pocket. His movements were practiced, precise. When he stood, he handed the bike back gently, like he respected the machine. and her. Try it now, he said. Marin squeezed the brake, and the wheel spun freely. Oh, she breathed. That feels so much better. Elias shifted his pack and nodded once. Have a good ride. And then he pedaled away. No lingering. No expectation. Just quiet help, freely given. Marin watched him disappear around a curve of mangroves. Something fluttered in her chest, light and unfamiliar. Maybe kindness didn't always have to come with strings. Maybe safety didn't always have to be earned. Maybe some people simply saw you. The trail grew easier in the afternoon, the path flattening as it wound past stretches of marshland. Her legs stopped trembling. Her breath became steadier. Two young backpackers passed her with encouraging thumbs up, and an older couple rang their bells in greeting. She wasn't fast, but she was moving. A small victory. At mile 8, she ate a granola bar beside a boardwalk. At mile 10, she rested under a palm. At mile 12, she caught sight of a dolphin fin breaking the water near the shore. By mile 15, she realized something incredible. She had not thought about Damon once. Not his voice, not his deadlines, not the office that had stolen her breath. Instead, she thought about sun-warmed air, salt on her lips, the feel of her muscles waking up, the growing weight of her Dawn token pouch, each stone a testament to her choosing herself. As evening approached, she rolled into a small beachside campground. A few other travelers were setting up, including Lila, who waved brightly. Look at you, Georgia Peach, Lila said affectionately. Still standing after your first day. Barely, Marin laughed, but her smile was real. Lila helped her pitch her tent, showing her how to secure the stakes and tie proper knots. When the sky turned copper and violet, they sat by a shared picnic table with a couple of other Greenway travelers. Someone played soft guitar, and a few lanterns flickered to life around the campsite. Marin hadn't felt this kind of quiet community in years, maybe ever. As night settled, she whispered goodnight to Lila, zipped her tent, and lay back on her sleeping pad. Her body ached everywhere. Her legs, her shoulders, even her hands from gripping the handlebars. But her chest fell open. She placed both of her Dawn tokens beside her pillow, the burden stone and the token of beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new miles, new fears. But tonight, she let herself feel proud. She had started, and starting was everything. Chapter 7. The next morning greeted Marin with a kind of heat that didn't simply sit in the air. It pressed on it. A sticky, syrup-thick warmth that clung to her skin before she even zipped her tent open. She swiped a hand across her forehead and came away damp. Welcome to the South. The sky was watercolor pink, the sun not yet fully risen, but already she could hear the hum, the infamous dawn chorus of insects waking up hungry. She stepped out of the tent and instantly slapped her arm. Mosquito, then her calf. Mosquito, then her shoulder. Another one. Oh, come on, she groaned, waving her hands like someone trying to fight off invisible spirits. Lila peeked out of her own tent, tying her silver-streaked curls into a scarf. Good morning, sugar, she said sweetly. You're meeting the locals, I see. Marin swatted again. Are they always this? Determined? Lila laughed. Oh, baby, you ain't seen nothing yet. Florida mosquitoes have cousins in Georgia and South Carolina that could carry off a grown man if he stands still too long. Great. So the Dawnshore Greenway wasn't just emotional healing, it was survival training. After breakfast and packing up camp, Marin started down the trail again. The first few miles were promising, smooth, flat pavement, the sun casting golden reflections on the water beside her. Birds dipped low across the marsh. Light shimmered on the mangroves. Then the trail curved into a shaded patch of forest. And the mosquitoes welcomed her like she was the guest of honor. They came in squads. She heard the whine in her ear before she felt the bites. She tried swatting, but they moved like synchronized ninjas. She picked up the pace, pedaled harder. Sweat soaked her shirt. Humidity wrapped her like a damp quilt. This is personal, she wheezed. Only a few miles in, and the southern swamp heat had humbled her. She pulled over at a small clearing, panting, wiping sweat from her neck, fanning herself with one hand while drinking water with the other. As she checked her map, She noticed Elias approaching from the opposite direction, just emerging from the tree line, brushing a mosquito off his arm like it was part of his morning routine. Morning, he said, voice steady. Marin pointed dramatically at her leg. They're trying to eat me. You're fresh, he said, deadpan. They can tell. Fresh. He shrugged slightly. New blood on the trail. They like beginners. She stared at him, horrified. He wiped a mosquito from his neck with the calm of a man who'd seen some things. You get used to it, he added. Eventually. Eventually as in today. Or. Eventually as in never, he said, a dry hint of humor tugging at the corner of his mouth. She snorted, and immediately regretted it when a bug flew near her nose. Elias lowered his pack, rummaged through it, and handed her a small spray bottle. Here. What is it? Mosquito repellent. Stronger than whatever you bought at the store. Don't inhale too deeply. Why? You'll find out. She sprayed it, coughed, and made a face. Oh my God, what is in this? Magic, he said. And chemicals we don't discuss. Even through the burn of the scent, the relief was heavenly. Thank you, she said, meaning it deeply. He nodded once, shouldered his pack, and started riding again. Not fast, just moving with his steady, quiet confidence. As he passed, he added, keep pushing. It gets better. And somehow she believed him. The afternoon brought a different challenge, her first real incline. From a distance, the hill looked harmless, a gentle rise, nothing intimidating. But by the halfway point, her thighs screamed mutiny. Her breath sounded like a wheezing accordion. Sweat dripped into her eyes. She pushed the pedal down and felt nothing. Her legs refused another rotation. Nope, she gasped. Absolutely not. I rebuke this hill in the name of Jesus. She hopped off the bike and leaned over the handlebars, chest heaving. A couple in their 60s passed her. You're doing great, the woman called cheerfully. The man rang his bike bell like a victory chime. Sure, Marin whispered. Great. Amazing. Probably dying. But she pushed one foot in front of the other, walking her bike to the top. When she reached the crest, legs trembling, she turned and saw the marshes stretching behind her, glowing in afternoon light. She sucked in a breath. It was beautiful. Hard, but beautiful. She earned this view, with sweat and pain and stubbornness she didn't know she possessed. A small victory. She pulled out her Dawn token pouch. Feeling around inside, she searched the ground near her feet. A small, round stone shimmered with tiny flecks of gold, sun-kissed and warm. Her third Dawn token, she realized. The token of perseverance. She held it to her heart. I did it, she whispered. I really did. By evening, she reached a tiny rest stop with a water pump and a wooden sign covered in carved initials and painted stones. A quiet pride settled into her bones as she set up camp, muscles aching but strong. She journaled before sleep. Day 2. I faced heat, mosquitoes, and a hill that tried to destroy me. But I'm still here. Maybe I'm stronger than I think. She placed her 3 tokens beside her sleeping bag. The burden stone, the token of beginning, the token of perseverance. Outside her tent, crickets sang. The southern night wrapped around her like warm velvet. And for the first time, she fell asleep smiling. Chapter 8. By the 4th morning on the Dawnshore Greenway, Marin woke feeling equal parts sore and proud. Her muscles ached like they were trying to negotiate a new contract with her, but she could stand, stretch, and breathe without wanting to collapse. Progress. The mosquitoes were already up and clocked in for their shift. She slapped one off her ankle. Please find another hobby, she muttered. It ignored her. Lila emerged from her tent fanning herself. Humidity's at 98%. Sugar. They're having a banquet. Of me. Of all of us. Still, the morning didn't seem threatening. The sky was hazy blue, patched with cotton-soft clouds. The trail wound through long stretches of marshland, cicadas singing their raspy chorus from the trees. A heat shimmer hovered over the path. Marin was settling into a decent rhythm when Lila called out from behind her, "Storm's coming." Marin glanced at the sky. Clear. Perfectly clear. That's impossible, Marin called back. Lila chuckled. Not in the south. Sure enough, not half an hour later, the horizon shifted. A bruise-colored cloud rose up from nowhere, swelling and darkening as if summoned. The wind changed, slow at first, then with a ripple that ran through the grass like a whispered warning. Then thunder rolled. Low, long close. Marin's heartbeat stumbled. Shouldn't we find shelter? Working on it, Lila said calmly. There's a ranger hut a couple miles ahead. A couple miles. In this heat, with a storm marching toward them like it had personal business. She pedaled harder, her breath thick, sweat dripping into her eyes. The air smelled like rain beginning to remember itself. Thunder cracked again, closer now, and the wind kicked up, tossing leaves across the trail. The first fat raindrop hit her arm, then another, then 5. Then a sheet of rain poured down as if the sky had been ripped open. Marin squeaked, not a scream, just a startled, ungraceful noise, as water soaked her shirt, her shorts, her socks. Within seconds, she was drenched. Mosquitoes vanished. Small favor. Lightning flashed, illuminating the marsh in a split white glow. Her fear surged. This is bad, she yelled. Lila pedaled up beside her, rain streaming down her scarf. It's just a summer tantrum. We'll be fine. I am not fine, but she kept pedaling. Her tires slid slightly on the slick path. Her heart hammered as thunder boomed, rattling her chest. Then, through the wall of rain, she saw a figure ahead, steady, calm, riding toward them. Elias. He slowed as he approached, soaked but composed, like storm simply respected him. There's a covered bridge up ahead. He called over the roar of the rain. Half a mile. Half a mile felt like half a lifetime, but it was their best chance. Go, sugar, Lila urged. So Marin pushed, legs burning, lungs heaving, toward the faint outline of the bridge. Lightning flashed again, closer. She nearly slipped turning the last bend, but Elias was there, hand outstretched, not grabbing, just guiding, hovering near her handlebar. Easy, he said, voice steady. Almost there. She breathed through her panic and coasted the final few yards into the safety of the covered wooden bridge. The moment she reached it, everything in her body released. She leaned her bike against the railing and bent forward, hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath as rain hammered the roof like fists. Lila rolled in behind her. Well, she said breathlessly, if you wanted adventure, this ain't a bad start. Marin laughed, wet, shaky but real. Elias stood near the entrance, water dripping from his hair, watching the rain with a practiced patience. He didn't look afraid. He didn't look annoyed. Just aware, present, grounded. You okay? He asked Marin. Yes, she said. Thanks to you. You got yourself here, he replied, surprising her. You're stronger than you think. The words landed in her chest like a stone dropping into still water, rippling, spreading, settling something inside her. After 20 minutes, the worst of the storm passed. The rain softened, the thunder moved north, and a warm breeze drifted through the bridge. Marin stepped outside carefully. The marsh gleamed, plants sparkling, puddles glimmering with reflected sky. Steam rose from the path. The world smelled like wet earth and fresh promise. She noticed a small stone at the foot of the bridge, half buried in mud. A soft, pale blue pebble, like sky caught in stone form. She picked it up. Her fourth dawn token. The token of endurance. Earned not through strength, but through courage in spite of fear. Lila smiled knowingly. Bridge tokens are special. Marin slipped it into her pouch. I'll remember this one. Elias gave a small nod, as though he understood exactly what that meant. They rode on after the storm, the world washed clean. Birdsong returned. The sun broke through the clouds in brilliant streaks. Marin's clothes dried slowly as she pedaled, and though she was tired, she felt lighter, braver, more herself. The storm hadn't defeated her. It had revealed her. That night at camp, as she laid the 4 tokens in a small line beside her sleeping bag, she realized she wasn't the same woman who stepped onto the trail in Florida, and she wouldn't be the same woman by Maine. The Greenway was changing her, storm by storm, mile by mile, kindness by kindness, and she was ready for tomorrow. Chapter 9. The border sign appeared almost shyly at first, just a green blur in the distance. As Marin pedaled closer, the letters sharpened into focus. Welcome to Georgia, her home state. Her hands tightened on the handlebars. Florida had felt like an adventure. Georgia felt like a mirror. She coasted to a stop just beneath the sign, breathing hard, not from the ride, but from the sudden tightening in her chest. The air here smelled different, or maybe she was just imagining it warmer somehow, familiar in a way that unsettled her. She stared up at the sign. Hey, stranger, she whispered. A car honked as it passed, the driver throwing up a casual wave. She lifted a hand back automatically. She wasn't going home, not yet. Savannah was still a long way east from this particular stretch of the Dawnshore Greenway. But just knowing she stood on Georgia's soil again sent a whirl of memories through her mind. Late night shifts in high school. Naomi crying after their first big fight. Humidity-heavy evenings where she'd sat on the back steps, wondering if this was all life would ever be. Work, exhaustion, sleeping, repeating. She touched her Dawn token pouch. I'm not the same girl anymore, she said quietly, more to herself than to the road. Her phone buzzed in her bike bag. Naomi, you alive? Marin smiled, pulling the phone out and leaning against the border post. Marin, barely. Just crossed into Georgia. There was a pause, and then, Naomi, oh wow, you're really doing it. How do you feel? Marin glanced up at the sign again. The part of her that had always played it safe wanted to say tired, sore, unsure. Instead, she typed, Marin, stronger than I thought I'd feel. Still scared, but good scared. A longer pause this time. She imagined Naomi sitting at her kitchen table, phone in hand, chewing her lip the way she always did when she was trying not to worry out loud. Naomi, you know you're brave, right? Marin blinked. The word hit unexpectedly hard. No one had ever called her that before. Not when she'd worked through grief. Not when she'd held the family together. Not when she'd kept showing up to a job that drained her soul. But here she was on a bike at a state border, heart pounding and sweat drying on her skin, and her sister, her overprotective, warrior sister, was calling her brave. Her throat tightened. Marin, I don't always feel brave, but I'm trying. Naomi, that's what brave is. Keep going. Text me again tonight, okay? Marin, promise. I love you. Naomi, love you too. Don't let these Georgia mosquitoes carry you off. She laughed out loud, wiping at the corners of her eyes. Too late, she muttered, swatting at her arm as another one landed. The Georgia section of the Greenway greeted her with long, flat stretches of coastal plain and marshland that gleamed under the morning sun. Pines lined the path in some sections, offering pockets of blessed shade. Other times, the trail cut through open, exposed areas that felt like riding through a hot breath. Sweat gathered at the back of her neck. Her thighs protested every incline, but she noticed something new in the protest. They recovered quicker now. She was getting stronger. Around midday, she ran into Lila at a small rest stop, just a wooden bench and a water spigot beneath a sprawling oak. Spanish moss drooped from the branches like gray-green curtains, swaying gently. You made it, Georgia Peach, Lila called, raising her water bottle as a kind of toast. Welcome home. Marin parked her bike and joined her on the bench, grateful for the shade. Feels weird, she admitted. Being back in Georgia, but not really. Going home. Home, Lila said thoughtfully, is a complicated word. Marin pulled out a protein bar. I grew up in Savannah. Sometimes it feels like that city is stitched into my skin. Is that a good thing? Lila asked. She thought of long bus rides to work, heavy-eyed mornings, and nights staring at the ceiling wondering if she was wasting her life. Sometimes, she said honestly. Sometimes not. Lila nodded, understanding flickering in her eyes. Where we come from builds us, but it doesn't get to own us. Marin looked at her. So what does get to own us? Our choices, Lila replied. Who we decide to be after what happened to us. The words landed like a stone in Marin's chest. Solid. Centering. I'm still figuring that out, Marin said softly. Good, Lila said. Means you're alive. That afternoon, the trail tested her, not with hills this time, but with distance. The day stretched long and hot. Her water ran low between stops. A section of the path detoured onto a quiet county road, lined with wire fences and barking dogs. The first time a hound launched itself at the fence, barking like it wanted blood, Marin's heart leapt into her throat. She swerved instinctively, nearly losing her balance. Easy, she scolded herself, cheeks flushing. It can't reach you. She passed 3 more yards, each with dogs sounding alarm bells as she rode by. Each time, her fear shrank a little. By the last one, she rode steady, eyes forward, pulse no longer pounding in her ears. They were loud. They were scary, but they couldn't touch her. Just like Damon's voice. Just like the past. When she reached a shady clearing with a small wooden mile marker, mile 78, she dismounted and walked over to a patch of sandy soil near the trees. Something glinted faintly beneath a tuft of grass. She crouched down and brushed the dirt aside, revealing a smooth, tense stone with a dark band wrapping around it. It reminded her of a road circling home, or perhaps a ring connecting 2 points. Her 5th dawn token, the token of return. Not a return to the past, but a return to herself. She rolled it between her fingers, feeling its weight. I can ride through Georgia, she said quietly. I can move through what made me without getting stuck in it. She slipped the token into her pouch, alongside the others. Later, as the sun leaned west and turned the Georgia sky orange, Marin found herself riding a long, straight stretch with no one immediately ahead of her. The rhythm of her pedaling became almost meditative. Push, breathe, push, breathe. Mosquitoes still hunted. Sweat still clung. But the panic that had lived in her chest for years had gone. Quieter. A sound behind her made her glance back. Elias approached at an easy pace, not bearing down on her, just eventually catching up. He rode beside her for a few seconds, his presence steady, like another line on the same sheet of music. Georgia treating you all right? He asked. She smiled. It's different, being here on my own terms. He gave a small nod. Sometimes going back through familiar ground shows you how much you've changed. She looked at him, surprised, wondering what familiar ground he'd had to ride through in his own life. The question sat on her tongue, but she wasn't bold enough to ask it yet. I grew up in Savannah, she said instead. Feels strange passing through my home state and not heading there. He glanced at her, eyes softening. Maybe home is wherever you finally start breathing easy. The words made her chest tighten. In a good way. Do you feel at home on the trail? She asked. He was quiet for a long moment, eyes focused on the path ahead. Sometimes, he said, more than other places. She wanted to ask what had driven him out here. Heartbreak? Loss? Guilt? He carried something heavy in the set of his shoulders, in the way he watched the horizon. But the trail was long. There would be time. Your pace is good, he added. You're stronger than when you started. It was the second time he'd said that to her, and somehow it hit just as hard. Thank you, she murmured. He nodded once, then gradually pulled ahead, giving her space. He didn't hover. He didn't disappear. He simply rode within sight, close enough to feel like protection, far enough to feel like respect. Marin exhaled slowly. Georgia wasn't crushing her. She wasn't drowning in old patterns. She was riding north. 1 mile, 1 token, 1 small act of bravery at a time. That night, as she lay in her tent listening to frogs croak and insects sing in the Georgia dark, she lined up her tokens in a row on her sleeping bag. Burden, beginning, perseverance, endurance, return. They told a story. Her story. And deep in her chest, under all the soreness and uncertainty, something new took root. Not just hope. Belonging. Chapter 10. By the time Marin reached the small Georgia rest station, the afternoon heat had settled like a warm, heavy blanket over the trail. Sweat slid down her spine, and mosquitoes orbited her like persistent satellites. She parked her bike beneath a patch of shade, shaking out her tired arms. The rest stop was simple, just a picnic table, a wooden trail map, and a water pump. A few riders lounged nearby, refilling bottles or stretching. Lila waved from a distance, chatting with another traveler. But it wasn't Lila who caught Marin's attention. It was the little boy sitting cross-legged in the dirt beside the trail map, drawing spirals in the dust with a stick. He couldn't have been more than 8. Freckles dusted his cheeks, and his curls were sun-bleached at the tips. A small backpack sat beside him, patched with cartoon rocket ships. His guardian, a tired-looking but kind-faced woman, stood nearby, sorting through their things. When the boy noticed Marin, he looked up with bright, curious eyes. "Hi," he chirped. She smiled, surprised by the burst of cheer. "Hi there. You look tired," he said with the blunt honesty only children wield. "I am," she admitted, laughing. "Long day. You going all the way to Maine?" he asked, as though discussing something as normal as a walk to the mailbox. "Yes," Marin replied. "At least. That's the plan." He nodded seriously. "Cool." She sat down on the shaded bench and took out her water. The boy scooted a little closer, not invading her space, just orbiting like a friendly comet. "My name's Jonah," he said proudly. "I'm only riding to South Carolina." "Well," he leaned in with a whisper. "My mom says I'm riding, but she's mostly pulling me in a trailer." Marin laughed softly. "That sounds nice." "It is." He stuck out his chest. "I'm training to do the whole trail when I'm older." "Well, you're already braver than most adults," she said. He shrugged like bravery was just something people wore like socks. "Are you scared?" he asked suddenly. The question landed in her like a pebble dropped into a still pond. She could lie. She could protect him from adult complexities. She could pretend confidence she didn't fully have. But his eyes were open, earnest. And she didn't want to lie to someone who hadn't learned yet that adults hide their fear. "A little," she said softly. "Sometimes a lot." Jonah nodded, satisfied with her honesty. "My mom says brave people feel scared and do it anyway." Her breath caught. The words were simple, but they cracked something open inside her. Scared and doing it anyway. That was exactly what she had been doing since she stepped on the trail. "That's really good advice," she said, voice a little thick. He nodded. "Want to see what I found?" He opened his small hand, revealing a smooth, pale stone streaked with lavender. It looked almost like a painted sky. "I found it for you," he said matter-of-factly, "because you look like someone who needs a lucky stone." Marin blinked. "For me?" He nodded. "Yup. You looked like you needed a good one." She took the stone carefully, reverently, warm from his hand, light and perfect. Her 6th dawn token, the token of courage, not earned through surviving storms, not through conquering miles or hills, but through vulnerability, through being seen. "Thank you, Jonah," she whispered. "You're welcome," he said, beaming. His mother called for him, and he hopped up instantly, running toward her with the energy of a creature made of pure sunlight. As he went, he called back. "Don't quit, okay? You can do it." The words landed in her chest like a spark. She swallowed past the sudden warmth in her throat. When Lila approached a moment later, she raised an eyebrow. "Well, looks like somebody just had a divine appointment." Marin wiped her eyes discreetly. "He's something special." "Children always see things clearly," Lila said. "Something we forget when we get older." Marin nodded, closing her hand around the token Jonah had given her. This journey had tested her muscles, her lungs, her patience. Today it tested her heart, and she wasn't losing. She placed the stone gently in her pouch, feeling its weight settle with the others. Then she rose, stretched her sore legs, and climbed back onto her bike, because she was scared, and doing it anyway. Chapter 11. The morning Marin left her Georgia campsite, the world felt bright in a way she couldn't explain. The air was thick with humidity. Yes, and mosquitoes still acted like she was the breakfast buffet. But something inside her had shifted. Maybe it was Jonah's words still echoing in her chest. Maybe it was the 5 dawn tokens resting against each other in her pouch. Maybe she was finally beginning to believe she could actually do this. She took one last stretch under the moss-draped trees before pushing off onto the trail. Lila joined her for the first few miles, humming an old gospel tune under her breath. Her presence was calm, grounding, like sunlight through branches. "You riding strong today," Lila said, glancing at her with a knowing smile. Marin blushed. "I feel strong today. That's because you are." Lila winked. "Growth looks good on you." Marin didn't know what to say to that, so she just pedaled harder, her chest warm in ways that had nothing to do with the heat. Around midday, the trail opened into a marsh overlook. A wooden platform stretched over glittering water, reeds swaying, herons picking their way through the shallow pools. Marin parked her bike and walked out onto the platform, letting the breeze dry some of the sweat on her neck. She stood at the railing, drinking water and staring out at the marsh. It was wild and still, chaotic and peaceful, just like how she felt inside. A quiet crunch of gravel behind her made her turn. Elias approached, again, not surprising her, just appearing like the trail had summoned him. He nodded once, acknowledging her presence, then leaned on the railing a few feet away. For a moment, they just stood there. The quiet felt comfortable. "I like that spot," he said, nodding toward the trees. "Used to come here last time I rode the Greenway." "You've done the whole thing before?" she asked. "Twice." Her eyes widened. "Twice? Why would you?" "I mean, that's a lot." He gave a faint smile. "Sometimes you come back to a place because you left something there." She studied him, wanting to ask what he'd left, what he'd lost. But she didn't. Not yet. The question felt like something sacred she hadn't earned the right to touch. Instead, she said softly, "I feel like I'm finding something out here. I don't know what yet." He looked at her then, really looked. His gaze steady, warm, almost knowing. "You will," he said. Before she could find her breath again, he pushed off the railing and adjusted his pack. "See you up the trail," he murmured and rode away. Steady, quiet, familiar now. And for some reason, she didn't feel alone after he left. She felt seen. The trail wound through quiet back roads and pine forests as the afternoon heat settled thick around her. Her legs burned, but she kept pushing. Hills didn't scare her the way they had before. Dogs barked behind fences, and she barely flinched. Sweat dripped, mosquitoes circled, and she kept going. Somewhere around mile 104, she realized something incredible. She wasn't thinking about quitting. Not even once. Not today. She laughed, a soft, disbelieving sound. "Look at me," she murmured, "actually doing this." By late afternoon, she reached the small wooden sign that marked the border between Georgia and South Carolina. Her breath caught. This border felt different from the Florida one. Florida had been the beginning. Georgia had been a return to her roots. But South Carolina felt like a threshold, a crossing into something new. She dismounted her bike and placed a hand on the sign. The wood was warm beneath her palm. Behind her, Lila caught up, breathless but smiling. "Look at you," she said softly. "Crossing states like it's nothing." "It isn't nothing," Marin whispered. "It feels big. That's because it is big." A few other riders cheered as they passed, ringing bells in celebration. Marin felt her throat tighten in the happiest way. She walked a few steps off the trail and looked down near the grass line for a stone. It didn't take long. Her eyes caught on something glinting beneath a thin veil of mud. A smooth white stone, streaked with a faint gold vein down the center. She washed it in her water bottle. The streak shimmered in the fading light. Her seventh dawn token, the token of becoming. She held it against her heart, feeling its warmth, its weight, its truth. "I am becoming someone," she whispered. Lila placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "That's all any of us can ever ask for." As evening approached, Marin set up her tent at a small, quiet trail camping site on the South Carolina side. Fireflies danced over the grass, pulsing gently like distant stars. She texted Naomi. Marin crossed into South Carolina today, feeling proud, really proud. A moment later, "Naomi, I just told Dad. He's proud of you too. We all are." Marin wiped her cheeks, smiling through the tears. "Marin, wish you could see it here. It's beautiful. Naomi, send pics tomorrow. Get some sleep. Good night, sis." She put her phone away, breathing in the scent of pine and night air. She pulled out all 7 of her dawn tokens, lined them in a gentle arc beside her sleeping bag, and studied them. Burden, beginning, perseverance, endurance, return, courage, becoming. A map of her transformation so far. A reminder that she wasn't just riding north. She was rising. She touched the token of becoming one more time and whispered, I'm not who I was, and I'm not done growing. The South Carolina night wrapped around her like a warm quilt, and with a full heart, Marin drifted into sleep. Chapter 12. By the time Marin settled into her South Carolina campsite, the sky had faded into a soft wash of purple and rose. Fireflies blinked lazily over the grass, and a warm, pine-scented breeze rustled through the tall trees. It should have been peaceful, and for a little while it was. She stretched out on her sleeping pad, muscles aching in that good, earned way. She replayed her day in her mind, crossing the state border, the growing confidence in her body, the encouraging texts from Naomi, the token of becoming rested safely in her pouch, warm from the touch of her hands. This feels like progress, she whispered into the soft dark. She drifted toward sleep. Then, rustle. Marin's eyes snapped open. Something moved outside her tent. Not the delicate skitter of insects, not the light flutter of wind. This sounded solid, a deeper rustling, a scratch against the tent stake, a low, snorting grunt. Her heart slammed into her ribs. Oh no, she whispered. Please no. Whump. The entire side of her tent bulged inward as something hefty rammed into it. Marin clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. What in the name of? More snuffling, more digging, more grunting. Her imagination conjured. A wild hog, a rabid fox Satan himself out for a midnight stroll. She fumbled for her headlamp with trembling fingers and flipped it on. The sudden glow illuminated the thin tent walls. The creature paused, then scratched loudly at the ground. Oh, Lord Jesus, help me, she murmured, inching toward the zipper. If I get eaten, Naomi is going to kill me. She opened the zipper just an inch, one terrified inch, and peeked out. Two reflective eyes blinked at her. A small armored snout sniffed the air. Then the creature waddled sideways and bumped directly into her pannier bag. An armadillo, she whisper-yelled. The armadillo, completely unbothered by her distress, continued rooting through the leaf litter like it had a mortgage to pay. Shoo, she hissed. Go eat bugs somewhere else. I am not a snack. It ignored her. They always ignore you. For the next 15 minutes, the armadillo treated her campsite like a personal buffet table, sniffing, bumping into her tent poles, rattling gear, and loudly digging at the roots beneath her tent. Somewhere deep in the woods, something else howled, a long, low sound that made her freeze mid-swat. Great, she muttered. A wildlife convention. Exactly what I needed. When the armadillo finally wandered off, the woods fell into another eerie silence. Too much silence. Marin lay awake for hours, eyes wide, listening for every twig snap and leaf rustle. Her mind danced between terror and exasperation. By the time dawn finally broke, she felt like she had aged 10 years. The next morning, Marin pushed her bike back onto the trail, feeling like a wrung-out dishcloth. Her legs were heavy, her eyelids droopy, and her posture more slumped than straight. She pedaled slowly, painfully slowly. Somewhere behind her, she heard a familiar quiet rhythm of tires on pavement. Elias. She didn't even have the energy to sit up straighter. He eased alongside her, slowing his pace to match hers. His eyes slid over her face, taking in the dark circles, the sluggish movements, the way she yawned mid-pedal. Tough night? He asked. She let out a laugh, so exhausted it came out like a groan. I was attacked. His eyebrow lifted. Attacked. Yes, by a prehistoric tank with legs. Ah, he said, as if this explained everything. Armadillo. Armadillo, he says. She gestured wildly. It assaulted my tent. It assaulted my nerves. I haven't slept since midnight. I think I hallucinated a coyote song at one point. A soft huff of a laugh escaped him, barely audible, but warm. They're harmless, he said. That's what people say right before being trampled by something with claws. Elias shook his head, amusement in his eyes. You're lagging today. I know, she groaned. I feel like someone unplugged my soul. You'll catch your rhythm eventually, he said gently. After a bad night, your only job is to keep moving. Slowly is still moving. Something in his tone, steady, calm, reassuring, eased some of her embarrassment. Thanks, she murmured. I needed to hear that. He nodded once. Simple, quiet, protective in the softest way. Then he rode ahead, not far, but far enough to give her space, to go at her own weary pace while still keeping her in view. Marin smiled despite her exhaustion. Even after the worst night she'd had on the trail, she still felt like she belonged here. And somehow, that made her pedal a little steadier. Chapter 13. Marin woke with the kind of fatigue that settled deep into her bones. Heavy, stubborn, clingy. Even the early morning sun filtering through the pine branches looked like it was squinting at her sympathetically. She dragged herself out of the tent, hair in a wild halo, face puffy with sleep deprivation. The South Carolina air tasted warm and faintly sweet, a mix of pine and dew and leftover humidity. A single mosquito buzzed by her ear. Not today, she whispered with menace. She slapped it and missed. Despite her exhaustion, she packed up camp slowly and methodically. Something about the routine soothed her, folding the sleeping pad, tightening the pannier straps, brushing pine needles off her gear. By the time she rolled onto the trail, the sun was a low orange coin pressed against the horizon. Her legs were sluggish at first, her breath uneven, but with each push of the pedal something loosened. Push, breathe, push, breathe. Her muscles warmed. Her body woke up. Her mind followed. Within a few miles, she realized, surprisingly, that she wasn't fighting herself anymore. She was settling into a rhythm. Even her posture changed. She sat taller, steadier, more certain. Marin smiled. Okay, she thought. Maybe today won't defeat me after all. Around mile 10, she spotted Lila ahead on a shaded bend of the trail. The older woman waved with her usual glowing energy, scarf fluttering like a little flag of encouragement. Well, look at you, Lila called. Riding like the armadillos didn't steal your joy. Only my sanity, Marin replied, laughing breathlessly as she slowed beside her. Lila gave her a once-over. You finding your feet again, sugar? More like my petals. Marin wiped sweat from her forehead. A rough night, but I'm okay. That's all any of us can ask for, Lila said. Sometimes the nights that take the most out of us give us the most to grow from. Lila's wisdom seeped into the cracks of Marin's doubt, soothing places she hadn't realized were still raw. They rode together for the next few miles, talking lightly. Where Lila had stopped for breakfast, how the humidity today felt like a wet wool blanket, how the trail seemed quieter than usual. When Lila eventually pulled ahead, Marin let her go, content to enjoy the solitude and the steady stirring of confidence in her chest. It happened near a wide, sunny clearing, a sudden snap beneath her pedal, followed by a loose, grinding sound that made her stomach drop. Oh no. No, not today. She coasted to a stop, dismounted, and leaned her bike against a wooden post. A quick glance confirmed it. Her chain had slipped. She exhaled. Okay, don't panic. YouTube trained you for this. Except, she didn't actually need YouTube this time. Her hands moved with unexpected confidence. She flipped the bike onto its frame, adjusted the derailleur, threaded the chain back over the gears, rotated the pedal, wiped grease on her shorts without a second thought. It worked. Oh my God, she whispered. I fixed it. She straightened slowly, surprised heat blooming in her chest, pride, warm and golden. This is new. She wasn't helpless. She wasn't panicked. She wasn't waiting for someone stronger to come along and rescue her. She had rescued herself. A soft crunch of gravel behind her made her turn. Elias stood a few feet away, hands on his handlebars, studying her bike. And then her face. You okay? He asked. Chain slipped, she said, trying not to sound too proud. But I fixed it. Elias looked at the gears, tested the pedal with one hand, and nodded once. Nice work, he said. Clean fix. The praise hit her harder than it should have. Thanks, she said, suddenly shy. I didn't think I had it in me. He met her eyes briefly, something warm flickering there. You've always had it in you, he said. You're just learning to trust yourself. Marin swallowed, caught off guard by how deeply she felt those words. Before she could respond, he adjusted his pack. I'll ride ahead, he said quietly. Take your time. But he didn't ride far, just enough to give her space. just close enough that she could still see him. Later that afternoon, when she reached another scenic overlook, a river glinting silver beneath the afternoon sun, she found a small stone near the bank. Pale green, smooth, sturdy in her palm. Her 8th dawn token. The token of capability. She sat on the river bank for a moment, turning it over in her hand, letting the truth of it sink in. She was capable. Not someday. Not with someone's help. Not only when fear wasn't present. She was capable today. Right now. As she was. She slipped the stone into her pouch, feeling it click softly against the others. Each token was a map of her becoming. And this one felt like a turning point. That evening, she lay in her tent, much calmer than the night before, listening to the soft hum of cicadas. Her body was tired, yes, but not defeated. More like fulfilled. She whispered into the dark, "I'm doing it. I'm really doing it." And this time, she believed it. Chapter 14. By late afternoon, the trail carried Marin into a quiet stretch of forest where the trees arched overhead like a living cathedral. The air was thick with the scent of pine and warm earth, and sunlight flickered across the path in shifting mosaics. Her legs ached, but in that good, earned way. Her mind felt clear. Her confidence was settling, rooting, stretching upward. She had no idea she was about to have her most meaningful evening on the trail yet. When she rolled into the small, primitive campground near the North Carolina border, she saw only a handful of tents already pitched, scattered across the clearing, some near picnic tables, some tucked beneath the pines. Lila's purple bandana was already tied to a branch like a cheerful flag. But what caught Marin's breath was Elias. His tent sat on the far side of the clearing, and he was crouched near a small camp stove, stirring something in a little metal pot. A curl of steam rose into the dimming sky. The smell, warm, savory, comforting, drifted across the clearing like an invitation. Marin's stomach growled so loudly she looked around to make sure no one heard. She took a deep breath and started toward Lila's tent first, her default, her safe zone. But before she reached it, Lila emerged from behind her tent, hands on her hips, wearing a knowing smirk that said she had already read Marin's mind. "You go on," Lila said with a nod toward Elias. "I've got a journal entry to write." Marin blinked. "Oh, I wasn't, well, I mean..." Lila laughed softly. Hum. Don't make excuses for wanting company. Go sit with that man before your shyness eats you alive. Sugar." With no room left to protest, Marin swallowed hard and made her way toward Elias. "Evening," he said without looking up, as though he had sensed her approaching. "Evening," she echoed, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. He stirred the pot once more. "Hungry?" "Yes," she blurted out. "I mean, only if you have enough." He gestured toward the overturned milk crate beside him. "Sit. There's enough." Her heart thudded. She sat. Steam curled from his pot in soft spirals. "What are you making?" she asked. "Simple stew," he said. "Veggies, lentils, some seasoning I picked up in Florida." He hesitated, almost shy. "It's nothing fancy." "It smells amazing," she said before she could stop herself. Something softened in his expression. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. He ladled the stew into a small bowl and handed it to her. The warmth seeped into her palms, calming her nerves. She took a careful bite. "Oh my goodness," she whispered. "This is incredible." "Glad you like it," he said quietly. The forest around them buzzed with cicadas, filling the silence between their breaths. A gentle breeze rustled leaves overhead. The campsite glowed with golden pools of early evening light. For a moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of them. Elias set his spoon down, leaning back slightly. "You're writing well," he said. "Stronger every day." Marin fiddled with her bowl. "Some days feel good. Some days I'm not sure what I'm doing." "You're doing more than most people ever try." She swallowed. "I didn't know what I was capable of." He looked at her, really looked. "That's the point of journeys like this," he said softly. "They show you what you already had inside." She felt that. Deeply. She stared into the glowing stew, gathering courage. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. You've done this trail twice. Why come back a third time?" A muscle in his jaw tightened, but not in anger, more like memory tugging at him. Sometimes, he said after a long pause, you come back to a place because you're not done healing there. Marin's breath caught. It felt like he had peeled open a quiet part of himself just for her. I understand that, she whispered. Their eyes met. Something lingered between them, not loud, not obvious, but steady and warm and new. After they ate, Marin wandered a few yards toward a small stream near the campground. Fireflies twinkled over the water like floating embers. She crouched and picked up a smooth stone, deep brown with a warm amber stripe through the center. It felt like shared warmth, like a soft glow, like companionship. Her ninth dawn token, the token of connection. She held it against her heart, feeling the truth of it. Connection didn't mean dependence. It didn't mean losing herself. It meant letting someone walk beside her as she became who she was meant to be. And that realization made her smile. Back at camp, Elias extinguished his stove. Good night, Marin, he said softly. Good night, she replied. She slipped into her tent, heart warm, soul steadier than it had been in years. For once, sleep found her easily. Not because she was tired, though she was, but because she felt held by the world in a new, gentle way. Chapter 15. The morning broke warm and soft, the kind of gold-tinged sunlight that seemed to lift the world awake, rather than startle it. Marin rolled her bike onto the trail, feeling surprisingly calm. The stew shared with Elias still lingered in her thoughts, not just the flavor, but the way he'd looked at her across the firelight, steady and unafraid of silence. Today was supposed to be a big mileage day, a long push, a day that would test her endurance. She was ready. At least, she hoped she was. The trail shifted from smooth flat stretches to rolling elevation. South Carolina gave way to hills framed by oak and tulip poplar, their leaves whispering overhead. Each incline took more from her legs, but something inside her pushed back, stronger, steadier. Halfway through a long climb, her breath stuttered. She pulled over, chest rising and falling fast. Sweat dripped into her eyes. Lord, give me strength, she whispered. Here. Elias rolled up quietly beside her, offering a small packet of electrolyte mix. You're sweating a lot, he said gently. Take this. She accepted it with trembling fingers. His fingertips brushed hers, just barely, and something warm rippled up her arm. Not the spark of lust. Not heat. Something steadier. Grounding. Human connection in its softest form. Thank you, she said. He nodded once. You're doing great. Am I? The word slipped out. You wouldn't be here, he said, if you weren't stronger than you think. She swallowed, looked away. The hills felt different after that. Not easier, but less lonely. The day stretched on, the sun climbing high, the heat turning relentless. Sweat trickled down her spine. Her thighs burned. Her hands felt raw from gripping the handlebars. But she didn't quit. The Greenway began revealing signs, literal ones. 20 miles to North Carolina, 10 miles, 5 miles. With each sign, her breath caught a little more. This wasn't just crossing another state. This was crossing into a version of herself she had never met before. Her mind drifted back to the cubicle, to Damon's dismissive tone, to always being told she wasn't enough, to never knowing if there was more to life. And yet here she was, over 250 miles into a journey she once believed she could never begin. A knot formed in her throat. The border appeared like a small, humble miracle, just a wooden post with carved lettering. Welcome to North Carolina Dawnshore Greenway, Northern Run. The moment she saw it, her breath broke. Her bike rolled to a stop. Her hands flew to her face. Tears spilled, not from pain, but from pride so deep it almost hurt. She cried in big, sudden, shaking sobs. Sobs she hadn't felt since the hospital scare. Sobs she had held inside for years. Elias stopped beside her silently. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't even touch her. Not yet. He simply stood close, close enough for her to feel his steadiness like a warm, invisible force. When her tears slowed, she removed her hands from her face. I never thought I would do something like this, she whispered. I never thought I deserved to. Elias stepped closer, not touching her, but near enough that she felt safe. You deserve more than you know, he said quietly, and you're proving it to yourself every day. She wiped her eyes, laughing breathlessly. I look a mess. He shook his head. No, you look brave. She froze. Something in his voice, gentle, low, sincere, reached deeper than any compliment she'd ever received. For the first time, his hand lifted, slowly, almost hesitantly. Then he placed his palm lightly on her upper back, guiding her one step forward. A touch so soft she barely felt it, but enough to ground her. Come on, he said. Let's mark the moment. She nodded, breath uneven. Beside the border post, a narrow stream ran through smooth stones. Marin knelt, searching the water until her fingers closed around something cool and ridged. A small gray stone streaked with a single upward angled line of white quartz, an arrow pointing skyward. Her 10th dawn token, the token of ascent. It felt like a piece of her own rising. She stood and held it in her palm. Elias watched her, something soft and unreadable in his eyes. You earned that, he said. She smiled shy, proud, new. I know. And for once, she meant it. That evening, as she rested at a picnic table, Naomi FaceTimed her. Oh my gosh, Naomi said, beaming. You glow. Marin, you look different. Marin laughed softly. I crossed into North Carolina. Naomi covered her mouth, eyes watering. I'm so proud of you, sis. Marin looked toward Elias in the distance, who was cleaning his water filter. Their eyes met briefly. He nodded, a small gesture that made her heart tilt unexpectedly. I'm proud of me too, she whispered. Chapter 16. The morning began beautifully, too beautifully in hindsight. The air was crisp. Soft light filtered through the Carolina pines. Birds chattered from the high branches. And Marin, for the first time in days, felt light inside her own body. Her legs moved with new strength. Her breath fell into an easy, natural rhythm. Even her thoughts felt airy, unburdened. She pedaled with a quiet joy. Maybe I'm finally becoming someone new, she thought. But the trail has a way of testing the very thing you think you've mastered. She approached a narrow bend, the kind where visibility is poor and cyclists often call out on your left. To avoid collisions, she slowed slightly, listened, didn't hear anything. As she rounded the curve, a rider barreled toward her. Fast, too fast. Their handlebars clipped, not enough to cause real harm, but enough to jolt her sideways. Her bike wobbled, and she planted a foot hard on the ground to steady herself. I'm so sorry, she blurted instantly, reflexively as always. Are you okay? I'm so. The man, late 40s, stocky build, mirrored sunglasses, whipped his head toward her with a sharp, slicing glare. You weren't watching, he snapped. You cut the turn too close. Marin's stomach dropped. No. I slowed down, I didn't see. You shouldn't even be on the trail if you can't ride it properly, he barked. Her throat tightened. I really am sorry. It was an accident. I didn't. Unbelievable. He shook his head sharply. People like you make this trail dangerous for everyone else. People like you. The words hit her like a punch. She had heard that exact phrase before. From Damon. From supervisors who didn't think she measured up. From people who took her softness for weakness. From a world that conditioned her to shrink. Her hands began to tremble. I didn't mean. Just stay out of the way next time, he snapped, and sped off without a backward glance. She stood frozen, the sound of his tires fading into the trees. Slowly, painfully, her breath fractured. People like you. You caused this. Get out of the way. You should know better by now. His voice wasn't Damon's, but it felt like it. Her chest tightened. Her throat closed. Her eyes blurred. She got back on her bike, but her body couldn't move the same. She drifted forward in a daze. A few hundred yards later, she veered off onto a grassy shoulder and let the bike fall gently to the earth. Then she sank down beside it and broke. Not loud at first. Silently, shoulders shaking, breath hitching, tears streaming down her cheeks. She hid her face in her hands. I thought I was done with this, she choked. I thought I'd left that girl behind. But trauma waits behind corners, and the trail had led her straight into an old wound. He wasn't following her. He simply noticed when her cadence dropped behind his. He backtracked quietly until he spotted her bike lying in the grass. Then he found her, knees drawn up, face buried in her hands, her entire body trembling. He approached slowly, making sure she heard his footsteps. Marin. Her breath hitched, but she didn't look up. He didn't kneel in front of her. He didn't pull her into an embrace. He didn't crowd her. He sat down beside her, leaving exactly enough space for her to feel safe, but not alone. For a while, he said nothing. Just let her cry. Just breathed with her. When her sobs softened into shaking breaths, he spoke gently. What happened? She wiped her face with the back of her hand, still avoiding his eyes. I bumped into a rider. Her voice cracked. He yelled at me. Said I shouldn't be on the trail. Said I was dangerous. Like I don't belong here. Elias's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice soft. That wasn't your fault. I apologized twice, but he just. Her breath trembled. He talked to me the way someone from my old life used to. And I just folded, like I always do. Now she looked at him, eyes wet, ashamed, raw. I hate that I become small so easily. Elias moved closer, slowly, deliberately. Then he reached out and placed his hand lightly on her forearm. Warm, grounding, steady. Her breath caught, half sob, half something else. You're not small, he said quietly. Not anymore. And you didn't deserve what he said. She swallowed hard. I felt like I was right back in my cubicle. Helpless. Worthless. You are not worthless, he said, voice low and certain. You're one of the strongest people I've met on this trail. Her eyes filled again. But this time the tears were different. He thumbed a tear from her cheek. The touch was featherlight, but it sent warmth flooding through her belly. Unexpected, tender, electric. She inhaled sharply. Elias paused, watching her reaction, not pulling away, but not pushing forward either. Marin, he murmured, you didn't do anything wrong. She nodded, but tears still spilled. He brushed another from her cheek. This one slower, more intentional. Something inside her stirred, an awareness, an ache, a pull. Not rushed, not demanding, just alive. She let out a shaky breath. Thank you, she whispered. When she finally stood, her legs trembling from the emotional crash, she noticed something glinting near a patch of wildflowers. A smooth stone, soft gray, curved like a teardrop. When she picked it up, the surface felt warm from the sun, almost pulsing. Her 11th dawn token, the token of release. She closed her fingers around it. I don't want to carry this anymore, she whispered. You don't have to, Elias said quietly. He didn't touch her again. He didn't need to. The space between them felt warm and charged, like the moment before a storm or a sunrise. Marin took a deep breath, and another. When she began riding again, her body felt lighter, not because she wasn't hurting, but because she wasn't hiding. Elias rode a few yards ahead, glancing back occasionally in a way that made heat bloom behind her ribs. She wasn't healed. Not yet. But she wasn't alone anymore either. And that made all the difference. Chapter 17. The morning air was cool and sweet, beads of dew still clinging to the tall grasses along the trail. Marin woke feeling lighter, still tender from yesterday's emotional unraveling, but her body felt surprisingly strong. The kind of renewed energy that comes after letting yourself break open. She stretched her arms overhead, rotating her ankles absent-mindedly. No pain, no stiffness, just a clean, ready feeling in her muscles. Today feels like a fresh start, she told herself. She packed her gear with more confidence than she'd felt in days. The wooded campground glowed in soft morning light. Even the air smelled new, like pine, cool earth, and possibility. She rolled her bike onto the trail and began pedaling, feeling that gentle hum in her muscles, that whisper of strength returning. Elias rode ahead at a respectful distance. Lila waved from farther down the path. Marin smiled. Today I can do this. And for the first few miles, she truly believed it. The trail shifted from smooth gravel to a narrow, rocky stretch following a shallow creek. Ferns dripped water into the path, making the stones slick under her tires. Easy, she whispered to herself. She slowed, tightening her grip on the handlebars. Her front tire rolled over a wet stone, then slid. Just an inch. Just enough. Her balance faltered. Her right foot shot down instinctively to catch herself, but the ground dipped. Her ankle twisted sharply beneath her weight. A stabbing pain shot up her leg. Ah! She collapsed sideways into soft grass, her bike dropping beside her. The pain pulsed in hot, immediate waves. No, no, she gasped, clutching her ankle. She tried to stand, and nearly cried out as the shock of pain made the world blur. Tears filled her eyes, not just from the injury, but from fear. I can't be injured. Not now. Not when I finally feel like I'm rising. She swallowed a sob, trying to breathe through the pain. She forced herself to sit upright, hugging her knee to her chest, rocking slightly. Please don't be serious. Please just be a sprain. Her breath quickened. She blinked hard. She didn't want anyone to see her like this, but someone already had. Gravel crunched behind her. Then his voice, steady, low, concerned. Marin. She froze. He dropped his bike and rushed toward her, kneeling in the grass beside her, hair falling slightly out of place with the urgency of his movement. What happened? Are you hurt? I slipped, she whispered, embarrassed. I'm fine. I'll be okay. He shook his head gently. You don't look fine. She winced as another pulse of pain hit her. Elias's eyes softened. May I see? He asked. The question, simple, respectful, broke something in her. She nodded. He carefully lifted her ankle, his hands warm and gentle. His touch was light, but sure, fingertips pressing softly along the tender swelling. Marin inhaled sharply, not just from pain. The closeness of him sent a new kind of warmth up her spine. It's swollen, he murmured. You can't ride on this. Her face fell. I have to. I can't fall behind. I don't want to slow everyone. You're not slowing anyone, he said firmly. And you're not riding today. His voice softened again. I'm staying with you. Her breath caught. You don't have to do that. I'll be fine. I don't leave people behind, he said simply. Especially not you. Heat rose in her cheeks. He touched her shin, just above the ankle, softly, reassuringly, his hand lingering longer than necessary. The warmth from his fingers spread through her like a slow ember. Her pulse fluttered. Elias helped her to her feet, one arm secure around her waist. She leaned into him instinctively, the scent of pine and sweat and warm skin surrounding her. His grip on her waist tightened just slightly as she wobbled. You okay? He asked quietly. She nodded, but her breath shivered. He guided her gently, step by step, until they reached a small clearing near the creek. The sun filtered through the branches in golden shards, casting warm light over the grass. Sit, he said softly. She obeyed, lowering herself carefully. He knelt beside her again, lifting her ankle a little higher on a folded jacket. His touch was slow, intentional, almost reverent. You're safe, he murmured. Those two words were almost her undoing. Something deep in her chest loosened, a knot she hadn't known she carried. Lila eventually spotted them from a distance and rode over, concern etched on her face. She took a fall, Elias explained. Sprained her ankle. Oh no, honey, Lila said, frowning. You rest up. We'll see you up the trail soon. The others rode ahead, leaving Marin and Elias alone in the quiet clearing. When the last cyclist disappeared, the silence deepened, not empty, but charged. Just the two of them, and the soft murmur of the creek, and the birds, and their breath. They moved to a small, secluded trail campsite just a short walk away. Elias set up her tent for her, glancing back occasionally to make sure she was comfortable. Every time she tried to help, he shook his head with a soft smile. Rest. I've got this. When she attempted to stand on her own, she wobbled. Elias caught her by the waist, strong hands, warm grip, bodies pressed close for a heartbeat too long. Her breath hitched. His eyes flickered to her lips for the briefest moment. Then he looked away. He brought her water, a simple meal, sat beside her beneath the pines. Their shoulders touched once, lightly, but neither of them moved away. You scare me back there, he said quietly. I scare myself. You don't have to pretend you're okay all the time. She exhaled slowly. I don't know how not to. He gave her a look, gentle, aching understanding. That's something we'll work on. We. She felt that word in her entire body. Later, when she crawled to the creek to splash cool water on her face, she saw a smooth, earth-toned stone nestled beneath the ripples. She picked it up carefully. It was shaped like a rounded heart, or a curved shoulder leaning into another. Her 12th dawn token. The token of vulnerability. It felt right. She tucked it against her chest, whispering, "It's okay to lean on someone." Elias sat just outside her tent as twilight deepened. He didn't say much, but his presence felt like a shield. At one point she shifted, wincing in pain. He leaned closer. "I'm right here," he murmured. Her heart pressed against her ribs. She drifted to sleep to the sound of him breathing softly outside her tent, keeping watch. Tomorrow he would bring her food. Tomorrow he would stay with her again. Tomorrow something would deepen. But tonight was the night everything between them began to change. Chapter 18. Marin woke to birdsong and the faint smell of coffee drifting through the pines. Her ankle throbbed with a dull ache, but something else fluttered in her chest, soft, warm, uncertain. She blinked her eyes open, the early light filtering through her tent, brushing gold across the fabric. Outside, she heard soft clattering. Elias. Her heart gave an involuntary jump. She carefully crawled out of her sleeping bag and unzipped the tent. A cool morning breeze kissed her face. Elias stood a few feet away, tending to a compact camp stove. Steam curled from a tin cup. His hair was slightly mussed, brushing his forehead in a way she hadn't noticed before. Without armor, without distance, just a man in the morning light. He turned at the sound of her zipper, eyes gentling instantly. "Morning," he said, soft but warm. "Morning," she whispered. "You hungry?" Her stomach answered before she could. He smiled. He poured hot water into a small bowl of oats and stirred in dried fruit he'd been carrying. "Hold on," he said when she tried to stand. He crossed the few steps toward her, slow, patient, and offered his arm. She hesitated only half a breath before taking it. His arm was solid beneath her hand. Warm. Steady. "Thank you," she murmured. His eyes softened in a way that made her stomach flutter. He guided her to a fallen log near the creek, his hand lingering at the small of her back, light but intentional. The touch sent heat curling inside her. Her breath caught. He helped her sit, then handed her the warm bowl. "Eat," he said. "You need your strength." "And what about you?" "I've already eaten," he lied. She narrowed her eyes. His smirk gave him away. "You're impossible," she said, fighting a smile. "And you're injured," he replied simply. "So you come first today." Her cheeks warmed. She took a spoonful. It tasted better than any oats had the right to. The morning passed slowly, beautifully. They spoke little at first, letting the forest fill the spaces between them. Birds harmonized overhead. The creek babbled softly. A breeze stirred the leaves. Elias sat close enough that their knees brushed every now and then. Every time they touched, a small, bright spark zipped through her. He didn't move away. She didn't either. Eventually, Elias said, "You're doing better this morning." She nodded. "My ankle still hurts, but emotionally, I feel lighter." "Good." He traced a line in the dirt with a stick. "Yesterday was a lot." Her heart tightened. "Thank you for staying." His head lifted, eyes meeting hers. "I wasn't going anywhere." Heat spread in her chest. They talked more, small things, harmless things. How he first started long-distance riding. Her favorite childhood vacation. His terrible attempt at baking bread once. The time she almost set her apartment on fire cooking pasta. He laughed, a real laugh, warm and rich. She hadn't heard him laugh like that before. It made something shift inside her. Around midday, she tried to stand and nearly lost her balance. Elias reached her in 2 steps, his hands catching her waist, pulling her gently back against him. Her breath hitched. His palms were warm on her back and hip. Her body fit against his like 2 puzzle pieces that had unknowingly been seeking each other. "Marin," he murmured, voice lower now. "Closer, take it slow." She swallowed, her pulse a drumbeat against her throat. He kept one hand on her waist longer than necessary. She didn't step away. Neither did he. For a moment, The world narrowed to the space between their breaths. Then the breeze shifted, breaking the spell. He cleared his throat softly, stepping back. Her cheeks burned, but her heart beat faster with the knowledge that he hadn't let go quickly. In late afternoon, clouds gathered unexpectedly. A strong gust swept through the pines, rattling branches. The weather app in Elias's pack chimed, sudden windstorm alert. "We need to secure your tent," he said. He worked quickly, anchoring extra lines, tightening the stakes. Marin hobbled over to help. A strong gust nearly knocked her sideways. Elias caught her again. Hands on her shoulders this time, steady and warm. Their faces were inches apart. "You okay?" He whispered. "Yes," she whispered back, breath unsteady. Another gust whipped leaves around them. "Come inside," he said. "Storm's going to get worse." The wind picked up, rattling the trees. The temperature dipped. Dark clouds thickened. Elias helped her into her tent, but the wind kept bending the poles. He hesitated outside. "You're not staying out there, are you?" she asked. His eyes flicked to the bending trees, then back to her. "No," he said softly. "I'm not." He ducked inside. The tent was small, too small for two people to avoid touching. They lay facing each other, only inches apart, the world outside roaring with wind. Her heart hammered. He studied her face, slow, soft, careful. She felt seen in a way she'd never been seen before. "You scare me today too, you know," she murmured. His brow softened. "You scare me when you pretend you don't need help. And you scare me when you act like nothing touches you." A corner of his mouth lifted. "Something touches me." Her breath caught. "What?" His gaze dipped slowly to her mouth, then rose again. "You." Heat flooded her. He didn't kiss her. He didn't move. He just let the truth hang between them, warm and trembling. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, something else stirred, quiet and rising. She drifted into sleep with the rhythm of his breathing beside her, their bodies separate but aware. Outside, the storm threw itself against the trees while inside their fragile shelter, something delicate and inevitable took root, like a wildflower that would either heal or wound them both. Chapter 19. The storm raged long into the night, wind rattling the tent poles, rain hammering the nylon ceiling. Marin slept in uneasy waves, waking every so often to the sound of branches cracking or the soft shifting of Elias beside her. His presence kept her rooted, grounded, safe. The storm hadn't just been loud. It had been relentless. Wind slammed into the tent walls, making the thin fabric bow inward with every gust. Rain fell in sheets, drumming against the nylon like frantic fingers. Marin tried to sleep, but every sharp gust jolted her awake. At one point, a crack of thunder shook the ground beneath them. She gasped without meaning to. Elias shifted immediately. "You all right?" His voice was low, barely audible over the storm. I don't like storms," she whispered, embarrassed. "Especially when the tent feels like it's about to fly away." The wind rattled the poles again. She squeezed her eyes shut. A moment later, she felt Elias move closer, slowly, deliberately, giving her time to pull away if she needed. She didn't. He slipped his arm around her shoulders, drawing her gently against his chest. Her breath caught. His warmth pressed into her back. His heartbeat was steady against her spine. The scent of pine and soap and something deeply masculine surrounded her. "You're safe," he murmured near her ear. "I won't let anything happen to you." Her body slowly relaxed, tension melting from her muscles. Her fingers curled lightly around his forearm. She let her head rest against him, their bodies fitting together as though they'd been carved for this moment. Outside, the storm roared. Inside, she felt sheltered, held, claimed, though neither spoke the word. At some point, she didn't know when, she fell asleep in the circle of his arm, her breath aligning with his as the storm raged harmlessly around them. It was the first night she hadn't felt alone in years. By morning, the storm had passed. Water pooled in shallow dips around the campsite, and everything smelled of damp earth and pine. The sky was washed clean, pale blue stretching endlessly overhead. Marin opened her eyes to find Elias quietly packing away the loose items inside the tent. His movements were deliberate, gentle, careful not to jostle her injured ankle. Morning, he whispered. Her chest warmed. Morning. He offered her a small smile, just a curve of the lips, soft and warm enough to make her breath wobble for reasons she couldn't fully name. You sleep all right? He asked. Better because you were here, she admitted before she could stop herself. His hand stilled. Something flickered in his eyes. Then he nodded slowly. As long as you felt safe. He helped her hobble out of the tent. The air was still cool from the storm, sunlight streaming through the pines in soft gold beams. Her ankle throbbed, but felt slightly better. Elias guided her toward a log near the creek, one hand warm at the small of her back, a touch that lingered just longer than necessary. She felt every degree of warmth from his palm, every ounce of strength in his fingers, every breath he took beside her. It was subtle, electric, irresistible. He brewed coffee over the camp stove, the scent rising with the morning steam. When he handed her the cup, their fingers brushed, a soft spark, a flutter, a heat that curled low in her belly. She held the cup tighter, not just for the warmth. Side by side on the damp log, they watched their coffee steam curl upward between them. After the night's chaos, the forest held its breath, dripping leaves the only sound breaking the hush of morning. He hadn't spoken much of himself this entire trip. He helped. He observed. He comforted. But he didn't reveal. Not until now. He exhaled slowly, his gaze drifting toward the water. You asked me once why I ride this trail, he said, voice low. Her heart thudded. He wasn't looking at her, but the tension in his jaw told her how much speaking this cost him. You don't have to tell me, she whispered. I think I do. He swallowed. Because yesterday, when I saw you break, when I saw you hide your pain the way you did, I realized I've been doing the same thing. Just differently. Her breath hitched softly. What do you mean? Elias set his elbows on his knees, hands clasped loosely. I lost someone, he said quietly. Someone I loved. Marin's chest tightened, not from jealousy, but from empathy. She was sick, he continued. A long illness. Years of it. I was her caregiver. I watched her fade, inch by inch. And when she died, he shook his head slightly. I didn't know who I was anymore. Marin's heart cracked open. She didn't breathe. He continued, voice uneven now. You spend so long being strong for someone else that when it's over, you don't know how to feel anything for yourself. He paused. And the worst part? I wasn't enough. I couldn't save her. That's not true, Marin whispered fiercely. Finally, he looked at her, and the rawness in his eyes nearly undid her. He exhaled shakily. His voice dropped. The first time I did the Dawnshore Greenway, I rode to outrun the grief. The second time I rode because I thought maybe if I pushed my body hard enough, my heart would stop hurting. He gave a humorless laugh. It didn't work. And now? She asked softly. He met her eyes, his gaze steady but exposed, like someone standing in an open doorway after years of darkness. This time, he said, voice rough at the edges, I'm riding to remember what it feels like when your heart beats for more than just survival. Marin's hand moved toward his of its own accord. Her fingertips hesitated, suspended in the inch of air between them, before settling against his weathered knuckles. The contact sent warmth cascading up her arm and across her chest, a current of something alive, an electric that made her pulse quicken beneath her skin. I'm so sorry you went through that, she whispered. But you were enough. You did everything you could. His eyes softened, the walls he carried thinning visibly. And Elias. She swallowed. You don't have to outrun anything with me. His breath caught. Something changed between them then, not dramatic, but undeniable. He turned his hand, so their fingers interlaced. Her pulse quickened beneath her skin, each heartbeat a small rebellion. His hand enveloped hers, calloused where she was soft, steady where she trembled. She stared at their intertwined fingers, the simple geometry of connection, and recognized the silent language their bodies had already begun to speak. The trail had brought them together, but something else entirely would keep them that way. Elias shifted his weight, a subtle movement that brought him nearer without crossing the boundary between them. The space narrowed until she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. Marin, he whispered, her name like a prayer on his lips, since meeting you. I've remembered how to breathe again. Something fluttered in her chest. Her lips softened, parting slightly as her gaze dropped to his mouth. The moment suspended between them, fragile, electric, unresolved. He remained perfectly still, though everything in his eyes told her he wanted more. Neither moved forward. Neither moved away. Later, as they rested by the creek, Marin spotted a pale stone half buried near the waterline. She brushed away the dirt. A smooth white stone with a slender vein of pink quartz running through its center, like a heartbeat captured in stone, delicate yet enduring. Her 13th dawn token, the token of honesty. She held it quietly, understanding. This wasn't just about admitting truths to others. It was about admitting them to herself. She looked at Elias, who was watching her with soft eyes. A small, slow smile lifted her lips. She traced the pink vein in the stone with her thumb. I think we're both finding ourselves on this trail, she said softly. His eyes met hers. What do you mean? You've been hiding behind your strength. I've been hiding behind my weakness. She placed the stone between them. Maybe we needed to meet somewhere in the middle. A smile touched the corners of his mouth, genuine and unguarded. Something unfurled inside her chest, like wings testing the air. He guided her back to the tent, his palm a gentle anchor against her waist, radiating steadiness through her tired frame. The night held no thunder this time, only stillness, only proximity. As they nestled into their narrow haven, her shoulder finding the hollow of his, their breathing falling into quiet rhythm. Marin closed her eyes against a sensation she hadn't packed for this journey, belonging. Not completely, not this soon, but in whispers, in maybes, in the simple truth that when she needed someone, he remained. Chapter 20. Marin woke to soft light filtering through the tent and the scent of pine drifting in from the pines. Her ankle felt stiff, but not unbearable. Progress. Elias was already awake, sitting just outside the tent, his back turned as he sipped coffee and watched the steam rise into the morning air. For a moment, she simply looked at him. The slope of his shoulders, the quiet strength in his posture, the gentle way he breathed into the morning. Some men took up space loudly. Elias took up space quietly, and somehow that made him feel even larger. She crawled carefully out of the tent. He turned immediately, concern flickering across his features. How's the ankle? A little better, she said. Still tender. He stood and offered his hand. Let's test it slowly. She took his hand, warm, steady, and let him pull her up. The moment she put weight on her ankle, pain flared. She inhaled sharply and swayed. He caught her before she could fall, his arm finding her waist while his other hand cupped her elbow to steady her. The sudden contact left no space between them, her chest against his, her breath catching as their bodies aligned. For a suspended moment, she couldn't tell if she wanted to step away or lean closer, the proximity both overwhelming and somehow not enough. You okay? He murmured, breath brushing her temple. Her fingers curled lightly into the fabric of his shirt. I think I need to lean on you, she whispered. His arm tightened, just slightly, a subtle intake of breath betraying the effect she had on him. Then lean, he said softly. She did. The world became very small, her hands gripping him, his arms around her, the slow rise and fall of his chest against her own. It took her a moment to realize she wasn't just leaning physically. Her heart was leaning too. With his support, she managed a few slow steps. Elias moved with patient steadiness, his hand never leaving her waist, guiding her gently but confidently. At one point she stumbled, not from pain, but from a sudden, overwhelming awareness of him. He caught her again, hands firm around her hips. Marin, he breathed. You don't have to push yourself. Her pulse thrummed in her throat. I want to try. I know. He looked at her then, really looked. Deep, searching, softened by something she didn't dare name. But you don't have to do everything alone anymore. The words slipped into her chest like a key turning. Later, back at camp, they found themselves beside each other again. A shift of weight, and her shoulder grazed his. Another small movement, and it happened again. The third time, neither pulled away, their bodies settling into a closeness that felt both new and inevitable. Marin held her dawn tokens in her lap, running her fingers over each stone. I've changed, she whispered. Elias watched her softly. You have. I didn't think someone like me could. Someone like you, he repeated, brow lifting. Yes. Her voice faltered. Someone scared. Someone small. He reached out, slow, deliberate, and took her hand in his. Marin, he said quietly, you're not small. His thumb stroked her knuckles, the softest, most intimate touch she had ever felt. And you're not scared, he added. You're brave enough to change your whole life. Her breath caught. I don't feel brave. That's because bravery doesn't always feel like bravery. His voice dipped warmer. Sometimes it feels like surviving. Sometimes it feels like showing up again when you're exhausted. Sometimes it feels like letting someone hold you when you're hurting. Her heart stuttered. Like last night, she whispered. He inhaled, slow, deep, shaken. Exactly like last night. They gazed at each other without blinking. Everything around them seemed to pause. The breeze, the birdsong, time itself. Between their bodies, just inches of warm air. The space it takes for a pulse to complete its rhythm. The invisible line that separates friendship from something else entirely. The moment arrived like a tide rather than a wave. He moved toward her with deliberate patience, his eyes asking a question. Her stillness was her answer. Her fingertips found the solid warmth beneath his shirt. His palm cradled her face as if holding something precious. Marin. The way her name trembled on his lips made something inside her dissolve. If you don't want this, I do, she whispered, her voice catching on the truth of it. I do. A shuddering breath escaped him. Then the distance between them vanished. The first touch of his lips was like dawn breaking, tentative warmth spreading across her skin. Something unfurled inside her chest, a flower opening after years of darkness. When he deepened the kiss, his thumb traced the arc of her cheekbone while her fingers found anchor in the fabric covering his chest. They breathed each other in, no space left between them. This wasn't desperation or hunger, this was reverence. This was the quiet recognition of two souls who had been traveling toward each other all along, finally arriving at the same moment, the same breath, the same choice. When they finally broke apart, they stayed close, foreheads touching, breaths unsteady. Elias whispered, I've wanted to do that since the first day I saw you cry by the river. Marin let out a small, breathless laugh. And I've wanted you to. He smiled, a real, soft, boyish smile she had never seen before. You have no idea what you do to me, he murmured. Her heart fluttered wildly. She did. She did now. Later, as they sat hand in hand by the quieted creek, Marin noticed a pale stone nestled against the roots of a cypress tree. It shimmered faintly, pearlescent, soft pink, like the inside of a shell. Her 14th dawn token. The token of awakening. She pressed it to her chest, smiling softly. Something had awakened indeed. And it wasn't just her courage. Chapter 21. By the time the morning sun lifted above the pines, Marin's ankle was stable enough for short walks. Not riding yet, but better. Elias helped her pack up camp, and they made slow progress toward Beaufort, South Carolina. As they emerged from a shaded trail toward the marshlands, Marin felt herself inhale deeper than she had in months. Spanish moss hung low over the oaks, swaying in the breeze like the hair of ancient spirits. Marsh grass shimmered gold in the early light. A great blue heron lifted into the air as if welcoming them. Welcome to the low country, Elias murmured. His hand brushed hers, not on purpose, but not entirely by accident either. Marin's heart fluttered. The small waterfront town greeted them with white porches, rocking chairs, and the smell of shrimp boats drifting in on the breeze. Colorful houses stood like pastel dreams along the quiet streets. Elias insisted she rest her ankle, so they walked slowly through Beaufort's historic district, stopping under a canopy of moss-covered oaks. Feel like you're in a movie? He asked. A Nicholas Sparks one, she laughed. He smiled softly. You deserve this kind of beauty. Her chest warmed. Just off the waterfront stood an old shrimp warehouse turned bike shop. Rusty nets hung on the walls. Ceiling fans whirred above exposed beams. A radio hummed with old soul music. The owner, a tall man with a white beard, eyed them kindly. You two look like trail people, he said. Long haul. Florida to Maine, Elias answered. The man whistled. You'll finish together or die trying. Elias cast Marin a glance, like he was silently saying together sounds good to me. Marin's cheeks heated. The owner tuned Marin's brakes for free and handed her a water bottle painted with a blue shrimp. On the house, he said. For luck. And because you look like someone who could use a little kindness. At the edge of town, under a sprawling live oak, two elderly women sat behind a folding table covered with jars of fresh squeezed lemonade and pimento cheese sandwiches. Trail lovers, one of them shouted, waving a paper fan. Come hydrate before you wither in this heat. Elias laughed and purchased 2 lemonades. Young man, one sister said, leaning in conspiratorially, you better take care of that girl. She got a sweet smile. Sweet smiles get stolen easy. Elias blushed, actually blushed, and Marin nearly dropped her cup. Just north of Beaufort, they encountered a small roadside stand where an elderly Gullah woman wove sweetgrass baskets by hand. The air smelled of salt, sweetgrass, and history. She beckoned Marin forward. You carry worry in your chest, she said without introduction. Let me braid you something for protection. Marin swallowed. How did you? I see it in your eyes. The woman placed a small sweetgrass star in Marin's palms. Light, fragrant, warm from her hands. This here keeps you safe on the road, she said, and reminds you that every journey is a healing walk. Marin blinked away tears. Elias placed a hand gently on her back. A grounding touch. A steadying one. Thank you, Marin whispered to the woman. You gone finish this trail, girl, the woman replied. And when it tests your heart, hold on to that star. A shiver ran down Marin's spine, a feeling like prophecy. That evening, they rolled into a small town where a church picnic was happening. Locals waved them over. Y'all hungry? Y'all smell like the trail. Come eat. Tables covered in newspaper were piled high with steaming shrimp, sausage, corn, and potatoes. Elias looked overwhelmed. Marin laughed at him, genuinely, freely. He nudged her shoulder. You're enjoying this too much. You're a northerner in a food ritual, she teased. It's adorable. She tried showing him how to peel shrimp properly. He researched YouTube tutorials. The women at the table giggled at both of them. You two together? Someone asked. Marin opened her mouth, then closed it. Elias glanced at her, eyes soft, longing flickering. We're figuring it out, he said quietly. Marin felt her heart bloom. Near the edge of the campsite, a cyclist known as the Low Country Poet sat on a rock reading to anyone who would listen. He handed Marin a slip of paper. A poem for the woman carrying too much and still moving forward. She unfolded it. The brave do not roar. They whisper. They rise. They keep going. They become. Her chest tightened. She tucked it beside her sweetgrass star. They found a quiet motel overlooking a wide marsh. As the sun dipped low, painting the grasses gold and pink, Elias sat beside her on the old wooden balcony. He slipped his hand into hers, slow, intentional. You okay? He murmured. I feel. Seen, she whispered. He squeezed her hand gently. You deserve to be. They sat in silence as the marsh crickets began singing, the sunset stretching like fire across the horizon. For the first time in her life, Marin felt like she wasn't running from something. She was running toward herself. Chapter 22. The next 10 days unfolded like a tapestry, woven with marsh winds, coastal roads, pine forests, and quiet, growing affection. Marin's ankle healed faster than she expected. Elias remained close, never hovering, never overbearing, just steady. Together they found a rhythm that felt almost like home. Day 1 to 2. Leaving South Carolina. They left the small motel behind before sunrise. The marsh glowed gold as they strapped their bags onto their bikes. Elias adjusted her seat height. Marin tightened his handlebar bag. You ready? He asked. She smiled. I think I am. They pedaled out just as the sun crested the horizon, the world soft and waking around them. By midday they passed another small roadside celebration. This time an oyster roast set up beside a boat landing. A group of fishermen waved them over enthusiastically. You cyclists need real food. One shouted. They were handed paper plates piled with roasted oysters. Elias tried to pry one open and nearly flung it across the dock. Marin laughed, so hard she had to clutch her ribs. Stop, he groaned playfully. You're enjoying this too much? Because it's adorable, she teased. You're usually so competent. Usually, she winked. Except with oysters. He flicked water at her. She shrieked. They both laughed until tears gathered in the corners of their eyes. The locals watched them fondly. You two look good together, an older woman remarked. Neither corrected her. Day 3 to 4. Passing Awendaw and Francis Marion National Forest. The trail took them through densely wooded pine forests, needles carpeting the ground in soft rust-red hues. Birdsong surrounded them. Cicadas pulsed in warm waves. Dragonflies flitted like blue sparks. In Awendaw, they visited a wildlife sanctuary where snowy egrets lifted gracefully from the marsh. They stopped their bikes just to watch the birds take flight. It feels like everything here wants to teach us something, Marin whispered. What do you think it's teaching us? Elias asked. That we're allowed to rise. He looked at her with a softness she could feel in her bones. Day 5. Charleston Detour, the bookstore moment. Charleston greeted them with cobblestone streets, pastel houses, and jasmine vines climbing iron gates. They didn't stay downtown long, too crowded, too busy, but they found a small hidden bookstore tucked between two old buildings. Inside, the air smelled of dust, old paper, and sunlight. Marin found a shelf of coastal memoirs. One book slipped from her grasp and fell open. Inside the front cover was a handwritten note. To whoever finds this book, keep going. The world needs the version of you that waits on the other side of courage. Marin's breath caught. Elias stepped beside her. Find something good? She nodded slowly. Something meant for me. Before she could talk herself out of it, he gently brushed her hair back from her face. You're changing, he said softly, and it's beautiful. Her heart ached in the very best way. Day 6 to 8, northbound momentum. South Carolina thinned into long stretches of coastal road. The salt air sharpened. The forest shifted. They rode for hours in comfortable silence, the sound of wheels humming on pavement becoming its own kind of intimacy. Sometimes Elias rode ahead and turned to check on her with a soft smile. Sometimes Marin cycled beside him, close enough that their knees brushed every so often. Every touch sent a small spark up her spine. At night, they stayed in small motels or camped beneath pines glowing with fireflies. They shared meals, shared stories, shared looks that lingered too long. One evening, as lightning flickered far off the horizon, Elias reached over and took her hand quietly. It feels right, he murmured. What is this? Us, riding like this. She squeezed his hand. It feels right to me too. Day 9, approaching North Carolina. The trail curved toward the state border. The air turning cooler, the trees taller, the coastline shifting. They passed a small farmhouse where a family sold homemade peach ice cream. Marin licked a drip from her spoon. Elias did too, then laughed when theirs melted too fast in the sun. This is messy, she giggled. You're cute when you're messy, he said instinctively. She froze. He froze. Then he cleared his throat and pretended to study the map. Marin grinned. Day 10. Crossing into North Carolina. The sign appeared around a bend. Welcome to North Carolina Dawnshore Greenway. Coastal section begins. Marin stopped her bike, heart swelling with pride. Elias pulled up beside her. Want the honors? He asked. She reached into her pocket and retrieved her latest Dawn token, a pale stone she found earlier in the day, smooth and cool in her palm. She placed it at the foot of the sign, whispering, for strength, and for what's still coming. Elias stepped behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, soft, warm, gentle. Whatever's coming, he murmured, we face it together. Her breath shook. Her heart opened. Her future shifted. They rode into North Carolina side by side. Chapter 23. North Carolina welcomed them with wide coastal roads and rolling dunes. The scent of salt and longleaf pines drifted through the breeze as they pedaled, the world shimmering beneath a cloudless sky. For the first few days, everything felt easy. Almost too easy. Marin's ankle improved steadily. Elias stayed close but gave her space. They talked, laughed, shared energy bars, leaned into each other during windy stretches. A quiet happiness settled over them, warm and new. But happiness has sharp edges when you've never felt safe holding it. Day 1 to 2, trouble in the wind. A strong coastal wind swept across the dunes, pushing against Marin's bike. She fought to keep steady. Elias glanced back. You okay? I'm fine, she called. But she wasn't. The wind pushed harder. Her bike wobbled. Her heart thudded. She didn't want to burden him. Didn't want him worrying about her constantly. Didn't want to be the weak link. He slowed. Want me to pace beside you? No, she said quickly. I can do it. He hesitated, then nodded, respecting her words. But the space between them felt different. Day 3, the unspoken. They reached a long stretch of trail where dunes rose like gentle giants on both sides. The ocean roared unseen beyond them. Marin rode behind Elias, watching the way he nodded to other cyclists, the relaxed rhythm of his pedaling, the steadiness in his posture. He looked sure, confident, certain, and she wasn't. What if she slowed him down? What if he regretted staying behind during her injury? What if he wanted someone stronger? What if this, whatever this was just trail magic, destined to fade at the end? Fear curled around her ribs. Her pace faltered. Elias turned around, worry flashing in his eyes. You okay? She nodded too quickly. Just tired. He smiled gently. We can rest if you need. She shook her head. No, really. I'm fine. But her tone was too sharp, too defensive. He blinked, taken aback. Okay, he said quietly. They rode on, but the silence felt heavier than the wind. Day 5, the crack forms. In a small coastal town, they stopped at a cafe overlooking the ocean. Wooden tables sat beneath fluttering umbrellas. Surfboards leaned against a wall. They ordered fish tacos and sweet tea. The moment should have been peaceful. But Marin kept seeing couples around them, laughing easily, moving without fear, touching without hesitation. She felt Elias watching her. She felt herself pulling inward. Marin, he asked gently. You're quiet. I'm just thinking. About what? Her throat tightened. I don't know, she lied. He didn't push, but she saw the flicker in his eyes. Not anger, not disappointment, just concern. It made her chest ache. Day 6, the moment fear speaks out loud. They camped near the dunes, the sky above them streaked with gold and lavender as evening settled. After dinner, they sat shoulder to shoulder, watching the waves crash in the distance. Elias reached over and took her hand, thumb brushing her knuckles. Her heart stuttered. Marin, he said softly, tell me what's going on. She froze. He continued, voice steady. You've been pulling away from me. I can feel it. I'm not, she whispered. You are, he murmured, not accusing, just knowing. Her breath trembled, and then fear broke through the surface. I don't want to rely on someone again. His expression shifted, softened, deepened. Marin, her voice cracked. What if this is just temporary? What if you wake up one day and realize I'm slowing you down? His eyebrows knit together. Why would you think that? Because it's happened before. People lose interest. They get tired. They find someone stronger or easier or, her voice cracked again, or they leave. There it was, her fear, naked, trembling, raw. His face softened with a gentleness that nearly undid her. Marin, I'm not walking away from you. But how do you know? She whispered desperately. What if I'm not enough? What if you are enough? Her breath broke. He reached for her hand again, but she pulled back, overwhelmed. The hurt flickered across his face before he masked it. Not anger, not rejection, just sadness. Talk to me, he said quietly. Let me in. I don't know how, she whispered. A long silence stretched between them, thin as glass, fragile as breath. Elias finally nodded, though his eyes were full of ache. We'll figure it out, he said softly. But we can't pretend it's not there. Marin wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the sea as the wind tugged at her hair. She loved the way he cared for her. It terrified her. It thrilled her. It made her want to disappear and be seen all at the same time. She didn't know whether to run from him or run toward him. But somewhere deep inside, she knew one thing. She couldn't lose him. And that fear could break everything if she didn't face it. Chapter 24. They left North Carolina beneath a sky the color of unpolished steel. It wasn't raining, but it felt like it might at any moment, the air heavy with unsaid things. The ocean faded behind them, dunes flattening into long stretches of road bordered by trees that grew taller and denser with each mile north. Elias rode a little ahead of Marin, not far enough to feel like distance, but not close enough to feel like closeness either. The space between them tugged at her chest. It wasn't anger that sat there, it was uncertainty. The kind that hums quietly, never loud enough to demand attention, but impossible to ignore. They rode for hours like that, the sound of their tires on pavement filling the silence. When they finally stopped at a rest area overlooking a marsh, Marin set her bike down and watched the water ripple beneath the wind. "Elias," she said. He turned, his expression open but cautious. "Yeah." "I'm sorry," she said, the words coming out softer than she expected, "for pulling away." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I know you're scared. I just don't want to feel like I'm shut out." "I don't want to shut you out," she said quickly. "I just don't always know how to let someone stay." Something eased in his face. He stepped closer and brushed a loose strand of hair back from her cheek, his touch light, but deliberate. "I'm not asking you to have it all figured out," he said. "I just want to stand beside you." Her throat tightened. "I'm trying." "I know," he said, and this time his smile stayed. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a promise. But it was enough to keep them moving forward. They crossed into Virginia late that afternoon. The sign stood at the edge of the trail, weathered but proud, and Marin felt something swell in her chest when she stopped beside it. Over 1,000 miles behind her now, a distance she never would have believed she could travel. She knelt and placed another stone at the base of the marker, smooth and brown, warmed by the sun. "For courage," she whispered. Elias stood close enough that she could feel his presence without him touching her. "For both of us," he said. The trail shifted inland after that, marshes giving way to rolling hills and tree-lined roads. The air cooled. The days grew shorter. They talked more again, about small things at first, then deeper ones. Childhood memories, books they loved, people they missed but didn't know how to return to. One evening, after a long day in the saddle, they checked into a small roadside inn run by an older couple who spoke softly and moved slowly, as if time itself had gentled them. Marin's ankle ached as she stepped into the room, and before she could wave it off, Elias was kneeling in front of her, unlacing her shoe. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," he replied. "I want to." He wrapped her ankle carefully, his hands warm and steady. When he finished, she reached out without thinking and rested her hand against his cheek. "Thank you," she said. He leaned into her touch just slightly, enough to tell her it mattered. They rode toward Washington, D.C. over the next few days, the trail growing busier, the world louder. Cyclists passed more frequently. Bridges arched over wide rivers. The hum of the city crept closer. One evening near the Potomac, Elias stopped abruptly and turned to her. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. Her stomach dipped. "Is it bad?" "It's important," he said. He hesitated, then added, "I should have said it sooner." The river reflected the fading light behind him, gold and restless. "We'll talk," he said gently. "Just not tonight." He rode ahead, leaving Marin standing at the edge of the water, her heart beating hard against her ribs. She knew then that the hardest miles weren't behind them. They were just beginning. Chapter 25. They entered the city at dawn. The trail narrowed as it wound toward Washington, D.C., concrete replacing pine needles, the air thickening with sound. Cars hissed past on nearby roads. Runners and commuters appeared in clusters, headphones in, eyes forward. The quiet intimacy of the coast gave way to something sharper, faster. Marin felt it immediately, the pressure, the sense of being watched, of needing to keep pace. Elias rode beside her now, close enough that their handlebars nearly brushed. He checked on her without words, glancing over every so often, his presence steady even as the world grew louder around them. They crossed the Potomac on a long, sweeping bridge, water flashing silver beneath them. Marin slowed, unable to help herself. The river was wide and alive, carrying history in its current. Elias stopped too. Big moment, he said. She nodded. It feels different here. It is, he said. Cities always are. They rode on, passing under trees, just beginning to bloom. Pale petals drifted across the trail, clinging briefly to Marin's jacket before lifting away again. They stopped near a small park not far from the river. Marin leaned her bike against a railing and sat on a bench, suddenly exhausted, not in her legs, but in her chest. Elias sat beside her. You've been quiet again, he said gently. She stared out at the water. I'm thinking. About me? He asked, not teasing. She swallowed. About us. He didn't speak, giving her the space she needed. I keep wondering what happens when this ends, she said. The trail. The miles. All of it. His jaw tightened slightly. I wonder that too. And that scares me, she continued, voice unsteady, because I don't want to lose what this is. But I also don't know how to carry it back into real life. He turned toward her fully now. Marin, this is real life. She shook her head. It feels protected out here, like the world hasn't touched it yet. He was quiet for a moment. Then, carefully, he said, I wasn't planning to ride this far. Her heart stumbled. What do you mean? I started the trail thinking I'd stop somewhere around the mid-Atlantic, he said. I told myself I didn't need the whole thing, that I wasn't built for finishing. The words landed heavier than she expected. Why? She asked. He exhaled. Because finishing means going back, choosing something after. And I wasn't sure I wanted to. She looked at him, fear rising fast. And now? He met her gaze. Now I'm not sure how to stop. The honesty in his voice undid her more than distance ever could. But you didn't tell me, she said. I didn't know how, he replied. And I didn't expect you. The old fear surged, sharp and familiar. So, what happens when we get to the end? She asked quietly. Do you disappear? His eyes softened. Is that what you think I do? I don't know, she said, hating how small her voice sounded. I've been left before. I don't want to pretend this doesn't matter if it's going to vanish. He reached for her hand, hesitated, then took it anyway. This matters, he said firmly. You matter. But I'm scared too, he admitted. Not of leaving, of staying, of wanting something I might not be ready to deserve. Her breath caught. They sat there, fingers intertwined, the city moving around them, alive and indifferent. For the first time, the fear wasn't just hers. It lived between them, shared, exposed, fragile. Later that afternoon, they stopped near a small cafe tucked between brick buildings not far from the trail. Marin leaned her bike against a railing, stretching her sore legs, when a familiar voice cut through the hum of the street. Marin. She turned, startled. A boy stood a few steps away, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes wide with recognition. He looked taller than she remembered, a little more sure of himself, but unmistakably the same. Jonah, she said, disbelief blooming into a smile. What are you doing here? He grinned. School trip. We're staying a few blocks over. My teacher said we could grab snacks before heading back. Elias watched quietly as Jonah stepped closer, his gaze flicking briefly to the bikes, then back to Marin. You're really still riding, Jonah said, off-threading his voice. She nodded. Still going. He studied her for a moment, head tilted, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. You look different. Marin laughed softly. I feel different. Jonah nodded as if that confirmed something for him. He glanced at Elias, then back at her. You still scared? He asked, not unkindly. The question landed gently but deeply. She hesitated, then smiled. Sometimes. He shrugged. My mom says being scared doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you care. Marin felt her throat tighten. Jonah shifted his backpack. You shouldn't stop, he added. Not now. You're not the same person you were when we met. Before she could respond, a teacher called his name from across the street. Jonah waved once, then jogged off, turning back just long enough to flash her a grin. Marin stood there for a moment, heart full in a quiet, unexpected way. Elias stepped closer. He's wise, he said. She nodded. He always was. That night, as they walked back toward their motel, Elias slipped his hand into hers without hesitation. We don't have to solve everything tonight, he said. She squeezed his fingers. But we can't ignore it anymore. No, he agreed. We face it. Together. Marin looked ahead at the trail stretching north, longer and wilder than ever. For the first time, the fear didn't make her want to turn back. It made her want to choose. Chapter 26. They found a quiet place to stop just after lunch, a small strip of trail that ran behind a row of brick townhomes and opened into a narrow park. A few benches sat under bare-limbed trees, the branches stitched against a pale sky. The air had that inland bite now, cooler than the coast, sharp enough to wake you up. Marin sat carefully, rolling her ankle in a slow circle. It had held up. She'd learned how to listen for pain before it turned into punishment. Elias leaned his bike against a railing and paced a few steps, then stopped, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the trail as if he could see the miles ahead stacked like a wall. Her phone buzzed in her jacket pocket. Lila's name lit the screen. Marin stared at it for half a second too long, surprised by the sudden tug of home, then answered. Hey, well, look at you, Lila sang, bright as sunshine through a kitchen window. You still alive, trail woman. Marin laughed, the sound small but real. Barely. I knew you'd make it, Lila said. I knew you had it in you. And don't you get all quiet on me. Tell me where you are. Virginia, Marin said, and the pride in her voice startled her. Near D.C. A pause. Then Lila let out a low whistle. Lord have mercy. That's not a little bike ride, Marin. That's a whole new life. Marin looked down at her hands. Her dawn tokens were tucked safely in her bag, but she could feel their weight anyway. Not heavy like burden, heavy like proof. I've changed, she said softly. I can hear it, Lila replied, and her tone shifted, still warm, but deeper. I can hear you standing up straighter. Marin swallowed. It's not perfect. It's not supposed to be perfect, Lila said. It's supposed to be yours. Marin glanced at Elias. He'd gone still, listening without turning around, like he didn't want to intrude, but didn't want to be far either. Lila's voice softened. Now, I gotta ask you something. Marin's chest tightened. Okay, you got somebody with you? Marin hesitated, the old instinct to dodge rising like it always did. But she was too tired to lie, too awake to shrink. Yes, she admitted. His name is Elias. Lila made a sound like she'd been waiting her whole life to say it. I knew it. Marin's cheeks warmed. Lila. Don't Lila me, she said, laughing. I told you. I told you that trail was going to do something to you. And I told you a good man was going to see you and not look away. Marin's throat tightened unexpectedly. It's complicated. I bet it is, Lila said, the teasing fading into something firm. Listen to me. You better not start making fear sound like wisdom. Marin's stomach dipped. What? I know you, Lila said. When something good shows up, you start calling it too good, and you start acting like being careful is the same thing as being smart. Sometimes being careful is just being scared with better shoes on. Marin blinked hard, staring at the winter grass. The truth hit her, so cleanly it almost hurt. Lila continued, gentler now. I'm not saying be reckless. I'm saying don't let your old life talk you out of your new one. Don't let the version of you who got hurt decide what the healed version of you is allowed to have. Marin's breath trembled. I don't know what happens after the trail. You don't have to know the whole future, Lila said. You just gotta know what's true right now. Marin glanced at Elias again. He was watching her now, not pretending not to. His expression was open, careful, like he was giving her the space to choose without pressure. What's true, Lila said softly, is that you deserve to be loved without having to earn it by suffering first. Marin's eyes stung. I didn't call you to cry. You didn't call me at all, Lila said. I called you because I miss you, and because you don't get to do big things and not let the people who love you witness it. Now tell me, are you happy? Marin's chest rose and fell. She looked at Elias, looked at the trail, looked at the sky that seemed bigger than it used to. I am, she whispered. And it scares me. Of course it does, Lila said, soft and sure. But baby, fear ain't a stop sign. It's just proof you're at the edge of something that matters. Marin held the phone close, swallowing hard. I'm trying to be brave. You are brave, Lila said. Now be brave in love too. Silence pulsed between them for a beat, full of everything Marin couldn't say yet. Lila cleared her throat, lighter again. All right, I'm gonna let you go. But before I do, tell that man I said if he breaks your heart, I'll haunt him. Marin laughed through the tightness in her throat. I will not tell him that. Oh, you will, Lila insisted. And tell him I like him. That's worse. Marin smiled. Okay, call me when you hit Maine, Lila said. I want to hear your voice at the finish. I want to hear the sound of you at the end of something hard. I will, Marin promised. When the call ended, Marin stayed still for a moment, phone resting against her palm like it had weight. Elias approached slowly, like he didn't want to startle her. What did she say? He asked, voice quiet. Marin let out a breath that felt like releasing a tight knot. She said, I'm scared with better shoes on. Elias's mouth twitched. Sounds like someone who knows you. She does, Marin said. She looked up at him. And she said something else. He waited, I steady. She said, I can't let the hurt version of me decide what the healed version is allowed to have. Something softened in his face, something like relief, something like ache. Marin's heart thudded. This was it. The moment where she'd normally laugh it off, change the subject, pretend she didn't want anything too badly. But she was so tired of pretending. I don't want to keep guessing, she said. Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. You said you have something you need to tell me. Tell me. Elias exhaled slowly, as if he'd been holding his breath for days. I didn't plan to finish, he admitted. Not when I started. I told myself I'd stop somewhere in the mid-Atlantic and call it enough. I thought I didn't want the end. Marin's stomach tightened, but she held steady. Because the end means you have to choose what comes after, he said. And after what I lost. I didn't trust myself to choose anything. I didn't want. He swallowed. Then I met you. Marin's breath caught. I didn't expect you, he continued, voice low. I didn't expect to care. I didn't expect to feel this. Alive. She stared at him, the cold air stinging her cheeks, her heart beating loud as the city somewhere beyond the trees. And now? She asked. Elias stepped closer. He didn't touch her yet. His hand stayed at his sides like he was letting her decide how close was safe. Now I don't want to stop, he said. But I'm scared you'll decide this was only trail magic. That when we get to the end, you'll disappear. The honesty hit her clean and sharp. She almost laughed at the symmetry of it, both of them afraid of the same ghost. Marin stood slowly, testing her ankle. It held. She took one step toward him, then another. It's not only trail magic, she said, voice soft but certain. It's me. It's you. It's what happened when we both stopped running. Elias's eyes flickered, bright with emotion he didn't try to hide. Marin reached for him then, finally. She slid her hands up his chest, feeling the steady strength beneath his shirt, and leaned in until her forehead rested against his. I don't know what happens after, she whispered, but I know what I want right now. Elias's breath shuddered. What? He asked, as if he needed to hear it spoken into the air. I want to finish, she said, all the way to Maine, and I want you there when I do. His arms came around her carefully, like he was holding something precious. He pulled her close, not crushing her, not claiming her, just anchoring her. I'm here, he murmured against her hair. I'm not going anywhere. Marin closed her eyes, letting herself believe it for one long, quiet moment. Then she stepped back just enough to look at him. When we reach the end, she said, we don't pretend it was nothing. We don't disappear. We talk. We choose. Elias nodded. We choose. They stood there for a moment, the wind moving through the trees, the trail stretching north like a promise. Marin picked up her bike and swung her leg over slowly. Elias did the same. And when they pushed off, they rode side by side, close enough to touch, not because they were afraid to separate, but because they were done pretending they weren't walking the same direction. Chapter 27. The farther north they rode, the quieter the world became. The trail narrowed into long, pale ribbons that cut through forest stripped bare by late autumn. Branches clawed at the sky. Frost lingered in the shadows even after the sun rose, and the air carried a sharpness that settled deep in Marin's lungs. Each breath felt earned. Each mile felt deliberate. She welcomed it. Her body ached in a familiar way now, not the brittle ache of stress or fear, but the steady soreness of use. Her legs burned on climbs. Her shoulders tightened against the cold. Her hands stiffened around the handlebars. And still she kept going. Still she wanted to. They spoke less these days, not because anything was wrong, but because something had finally settled. Words felt unnecessary when the rhythm of riding side by side said enough. Elias matched her pace without thinking. When she slowed, he slowed. When she surged forward, he followed. No questions, no pressure, just presence. They crossed through small towns that looked like they had been holding their breath all winter. Closed shops, quiet streets, a diner with steamed windows where they stopped for soup that tasted like salt and comfort. A woman behind the counter called them Han and pressed an extra roll into Marin's hand when she wasn't looking. Outside, Elias waited with their bikes, stamping his feet against the cold. "You good?" he asked. Marin nodded, warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the soup. "Yeah, I am." Later, as the trail wound along a river edged with ice, Marin found herself thinking about Florida. About that first morning. The heat. The uncertainty. The weight of the stone she had picked up with shaking hands, not knowing what it would mean. She had carried it all this way. She wondered how many versions of herself were buried in the miles behind her. The woman who stayed quiet at work. The woman who apologized too much. The woman who believed rest had to be earned and love had to be survived. Those women hadn't vanished. They had softened, learned, stepped aside. Elias glanced over, catching the change in her expression. "What's going on in that head of yours?" She smiled faintly. "I was just thinking about who I was when this started. And I don't miss her the way I thought I would." He reached out, his gloved hand brushing hers, brief but grounding. "You didn't lose her. You grew." They climbed steadily that afternoon, the land rising in gentle but persistent waves. At the top of a long incline, Marin stopped, chest heaving, legs trembling. The view stretched wide and gray-green, water glinting through the trees. She laughed, breathless. "I would have quit on that hill a month ago." Elias leaned on his bike beside her. "You didn't." "No," she said. "I didn't." That night, they stayed in a small inn perched above a rocky shoreline. The ocean here was different, darker, louder, impatient. Waves slammed into stone with a force that felt ancient. They walked together along the edge of the cliffs, bundled against the wind. The sky burned briefly with color before surrendering to dusk. Elias stopped and turned toward her. "I've been thinking," he said. Marin waited. "I spent a long time believing that loving someone meant losing myself," he continued. "That if I cared too deeply, I'd disappear again." Her heart tightened. "And somewhere along this trail," he said, voice steady but raw, "I realized that wasn't true. I didn't fade with you. I sharpened. I remembered parts of myself I thought were gone." Marin felt the words settle into her bones. "I used to think love meant shrinking," she said quietly, "making room by becoming smaller. And now I know it means standing where I am and letting someone see me," she said, "even when I'm scared." Elias rested his forehead against hers, the wind tugging at their jackets. "I don't want to leave this behind." "Neither do I," she said, "but I don't want to trap it either." He nodded. "Then we don't trap it. We choose it." The word echoed between them. Choose. Back in their room, Marin spread her dawn tokens across the desk. The stones formed a quiet timeline of her journey, each one smooth, worn, altered by distance and touch. Elias watched her, his presence calm, unhurried. She lifted the first stone last, the beginning stone, the one she had carried every mile. Tomorrow, she would decide what to do with it. Outside, the wind rattled the windows and the ocean kept its steady vigil. Inside, Marin felt something she hadn't expected at the end of such a long road. Readiness, not to be done, but to begin again on her own terms with her whole heart intact. Chapter 28. They reached Maine before dawn. The last miles came in darkness, the trail lit only by their headlamps and the faint silver wash of moonlight on the water. The air was colder than anything Marin had known on this journey, the kind of cold that felt clean, almost holy, as if it could burn away whatever was left of her old life. Their tires whispered over damp pavement. The ocean moved beside them, unseen but present, a low, constant breathing in the dark. Somewhere far off, a buoy bell rang and rang again. Marin's hands were numb inside her gloves. Her thighs burned in a steady, stubborn way. Every part of her wanted to stop, and every part of her kept going anyway. Elias rode close, his shoulder occasionally brushing hers in the narrow stretches. Not a crutch, not a guard, a companion, a witness. When the first hint of light softened the horizon, she saw the sign ahead. The northern terminus. For a moment she couldn't breathe. She rolled to a stop and put her foot down, wobbling slightly on legs that had carried her farther than she'd ever carried herself. Elias stopped beside her without a word. The world was quiet in that pre-dawn way, as if even the wind was waiting. Marin stepped off her bike slowly. Her body trembled, not from weakness, but from the enormity of arriving. 3,000 miles, a lifetime measured in pedal strokes. She rested her forehead briefly against her handlebars and closed her eyes. The memories came in flashes, Florida heat and sunrise, mosquitoes whining in the dark, Spanish moss and laughter, her ankle twisting under her, the sharp shock of pain, Elias's arm around her in a storm, the first kiss, Lila's voice in her ear, calling fear what it was and still telling her to keep going. She straightened and turned toward the sign. A small clearing sat nearby, worn down by many feet. At its center was a low mound of stones, cairns stacked by travelers who had come before. Someone had tied a strip of faded ribbon to a branch. Someone else had left a worn bicycle chain arranged in a circle like a halo. Marin's throat tightened. She unzipped her handlebar bag and took out her dawn tokens. One by one, she laid them out on the ground. The pale stone from the North Carolina border, the smooth brown one from Virginia, the pearly one that had felt like awakening. The sweetgrass star, still fragrant in a faint, earthy way, tucked safely among them. Then she reached deeper into her bag and drew out the first stone, the Florida stone. It was smaller than it had felt in her palm that first morning. Or maybe she had grown around it. It lay against her skin, cool and familiar, like a secret she had carried so long it had become part of her. Elias stood a few steps away, giving her space, his face turned toward the horizon where the sky was beginning to blush with color. Marin held the stone in both hands and closed her eyes. She thought of her cubicle, the fluorescent lights, the tightness in her chest that day she couldn't breathe, the look on her boss's face when she asked for help, the moment she realized her life was worth more than being useful. She thought of the version of herself who would have stayed anyway, who would have apologized, who would have swallowed pain until it turned into silence. She pictured that woman standing at the edge of the shoreline in Florida, picking up this stone as the sun rose. She had been so scared, and still she had begun. A sob rose in Marin's throat, surprising her with its strength. She didn't fight it. She let it move through her, hot against the cold air, and when she opened her eyes, the world looked sharper, brighter. She turned her head toward Elias. He was watching her now, his expression open, steady. No pity, no pressure, just love that didn't demand she perform for it. Marin lifted the stone slightly. "I didn't think I could do it," she whispered. Elias stepped closer. "You did." She laughed softly through tears. "I did." The sky shifted, pink deepening into gold. The first edge of the sun broke over the horizon, and the light spread across the water in a trembling path. Dawn. Marin inhaled deeply, holding the Florida stone to her chest. Then she walked to the shoreline. The ocean was colder here, darker, and it smelled like salt and endings and beginnings. The wind tugged at her hair. Her shoes sank slightly into damp sand as she reached the edge. She held the stone out in front of her, palm open, and spoke to it quietly, as if it could hear. "I'm not your prisoner anymore," she whispered. "I'm not small. I'm not stuck. I'm not living for permission." She paused. the words shaking loose from somewhere deep. I forgive you, she added, and realized she wasn't talking to the stone at all. She looked back once. Elias stood a few steps away, hands in his pockets, waiting. She faced the water again, and she released the stone. It left her hand with a small arc and disappeared into the sea with the softest sound, swallowed instantly, as if the ocean had been waiting to take it all along. Marin stood still, breath trembling, and felt the strangest sensation, lightness, sudden and clean, like a door opening in her chest. She returned to the clearing and knelt beside her other stones. One by one, she stacked them into a small cairn of her own, arranging them not by size, but by meaning. She placed the sweetgrass star at the base, tucked where it would hold the whole thing steady. When she finished, she sat back on her heels and stared at what she'd made. A small monument, not to distance, to change. Elias knelt beside her. Beautiful, he murmured. Marin's eyes stung again. It looks like a new self. He nodded. That's because it is. She reached into her bag one last time and pulled out the final token, something she had been given at the terminus station, a small medallion, simple and worn-looking, stamped with a rising sun. Her final token. She held it in her palm for a moment, letting it warm against her skin. Then she looked at Elias. The fear that used to rise when she looked at someone she cared about didn't come this time. Not as a warning, not as a reason to retreat. It was there only as a reminder that this mattered. I don't want to pretend this ends here, she said. Elias's eyes softened. I don't either. Marin stood slowly, feeling the ache in her legs, the weightlessness in her chest. I don't know exactly what comes next, she admitted. But I know I want to choose it, not drift into it. Elias rose too, close enough now that she could feel his warmth through his jacket. Then choose, he said gently. Say it. Marin's throat tightened, but she didn't look away. I want you, she said simply. Not just on the trail. After. In the real-life part. Elias exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for months. He cupped her face with both hands, thumbs brushing away the tears she didn't realize had fallen. His forehead rested against hers. I'm yours, he murmured. If you'll have me. Marin smiled, shaky and bright. I will. He kissed her then, not like the first time, tender and uncertain, but like someone who had decided. The kiss was warm and steady, full of gratitude and promise, like dawn itself. When they pulled apart, the sun was fully risen, the world washed in gold. Marin's phone buzzed in her pocket. She laughed softly and answered without checking the screen, already knowing. You did it, Lila's voice cried, loud with joy. I know you did. I felt it in my spirit. Marin laughed, tears spilling again, and turned slightly so Elias could hear. I did, she said. I'm in Maine. Lila screamed. My girl. My girl. Marin covered the phone for a second and looked at Elias. She's going to break the speaker. He smiled. Let her. Marin brought the phone back. Lila. You were right. I know, Lila said, smug and laughing. Now listen. Don't you bring your brave self all the way to the top of the world just to chicken out in love. Hear me? Marin's cheeks warmed. She glanced at Elias, whose eyes crinkled at the corners. I hear you, she said. Good, Lila replied, suddenly softer. I'm proud of you. I want you to remember this feeling. Not the miles, the becoming. Marin's throat tightened again. I will. When she ended the call, she stood for a moment with her phone in her hand, staring at the horizon. The trail was finished, but she wasn't finished. Elias reached for her hand and laced his fingers through hers. Together they turned back toward their bikes, the morning stretching wide and new in front of them. Marin took one last look at her cairn, at the place where her old self had been released into the sea. Then she swung her leg over her bike, smiled at Elias, and pushed off just a few feet, just enough to feel the wheels roll beneath her again. Not because she had somewhere to run, because she finally knew how to live.